If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Since it's spooky season, people who have genuinely interacted with or confronted the paranormal, demonic beings, or spooky apparitions, share your story.
Confronting a shadow person. Here is a story that I thought you guys might like. I woke up one night around 3 a.m. As I made my way to the kitchen to get some water. I noticed that a shadow person was sitting in my recliner in the family room. I would say that I was shocked, but the truth is that I have seen shadow people my entire life, so one more encounter was passé at this point. Just to make sure that my eyes were not playing tricks on me, I stood there, motionless, for roughly 2 minutes to give my eyes time to adjust to the light. As my eyes adjusted, it was clear that there was indeed a shadow person sitting in my recliner, staring at me. I am not sure why, but I decided to start walking towards it. With each step, it continued to stare at me, and as I drew closer, it actually leaned forward as if ready to flee. As it leaned forward, I stopped and just stood there. It stared back at me and gradually leaned back into the recliner. I then started again, walking towards it, which caused it to lean forward once again and eventually evaporate away as I was within 3 steps from it. I stood there and shrugged my shoulders. And shook my head in disappointment. I expected something to happen, but it didn't. So what does everyone think? Has anyone else had the opportunity to try something similar? In a previous home, there was an area on the property that always gave me the creeps. It only got overpowering at night, and it was to the point I didn't like going out to the barn at night to feed the horses and made my husband do it. He never felt anything. Had a friend over one evening, and she wanted to see my horses. It was already dark, but I would rather not look silly to my friend, so I went out there with her but didn't say anything about it. I was just going to deal with it. Well, she stops right in the spot I always start getting the unsettling feeling and says, "I don't want to alarm you, but something with ill intent is hanging around here." Well, a little while later, a few weeks, my husband had to travel for work, which means I was stuck going out to do the night feeding while he was out of town. As I made my way to the barn, I began to experience a heightened sense of unease, even before I arrived at the location. I tried to write it off as me being paranoid about being home alone and having to go out after dark. Then it felt like someone touched me on my back. I became frightened and yelled loudly, "Leave me the duck alone." And a few other things. But it never bothered me again after that. I still occasionally experience discomfort in that area, but not to the same extent as before. I experienced a demonic presence. When I was little, I was very attuned to beings of different realms. Think fae, ghosts, lower vibrational beings, etc. I experienced trauma as a child connected to my father, and when spending time in his home, I recall seeing a large black mass, interacting with it, and feeling safe near it. Possibly I called it to me somehow to protect me from danger. Fast forward to now, I am 20 and have lived in many homes since then. Recently, I have started to feel the exact same presence in my current home. Only it was intense and overwhelming. I communicated with it by candlelight, but the interaction was not very successful. Consequently, I cleansed the apartment with sage twice and did not experience any presence for some time. Recently, during a nap with my partner, I experienced what I initially brushed off as sleep paralysis. I was lying on my stomach, face down, and suddenly, while I was very awake, my body went heavier than lead, and I was paralyzed. I felt the very essence of my being getting pulled downwards towards something. It was absolutely terrifying. And then I heard a deep voice all around me in a language I'd never heard before. It was so loud, almost like shouting. I managed to pull myself out of it to find I had scratched my partner really hard. He told me my body was shaking a little, and my breathing went erratic. I believe a spirit being was trying to possess me or pull me into the astral or shadow plane to communicate on its terms. It was ducking terrifying. I truly don't believe it was sleep paralysis. One of my many ghost interactions. About a year ago I was in my room doing nothing. All I remember was needing my mother for something. Instinctively I went to go look for her. The house felt empty, but I still decided to find my mom. I checked every room where I thought she might be, and it was foolish to check her room last. I opened the door to her room and saw her sleeping in her bed. I asked her if she was awake, because I wasn't the smartest child, and she responded, "I'm right here." After speaking to her about what I wanted her to help with, she didn't respond. I assumed she had fallen asleep again, so I left the room. 3 hours later I heard the front door open. My mind thought it was my dad, since they both worked the same job and usually finished the same shifts together. But it was my mother. I felt confused, so I went to check her room. After finding nobody asleep, my mother asked me what was wrong. I shrugged it off and thought I was seeing things. But I swear I saw someone breathing, someone was talking to me, responding. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure no one was home. I saw an apparition of a dead child with no eyes. When I was 12 years old, I was in my bed. It was around 10:30 at night. I remember I wasn't very tired and was wide awake. To the left of my bed was the open door to my room, and I found myself just staring outside it, doing nothing and hoping that I might eventually fall asleep, even though I wasn't tired at all. My parents were in their room nearby, and I could faintly hear their TV. At that time, my mom had a crystal lamp that she turned on every night, which meant that the area outside my room and my room itself was not completely pitch black. It was bright enough to look around my room but dark enough that I could sleep. While lying on my side and looking out my door, I decided to turn to the other side, thinking that perhaps the dim light was keeping me awake. However, as I turned over, I clearly saw what appeared to be a child with white pasty skin, the color of a cold dead body, short straight black hair, and a mouth so wide open that you could probably fit an entire apple in it. But the worst part that I will never forget was its eyes. There were no eyes at all, just pitch black gaping holes, but I could feel whatever it was, even though it didn't have eyes, staring straight at me. It was as real as when my mom was in my room saying good night earlier. I froze for 5 seconds trying to process what I'm seeing. I felt its presence when we locked eyes. It didn't make any noise or move at all, just stared directly at me. Very soon the confusion and shock turned into pure terror, and I have never jumped out of bed faster than that night and ran directly to my parents' room crying and shaking intensely out of fear. I'm now 26 years old, and I have never forgotten what I saw that night as well as the feeling of its presence, a presence I've never felt since that night. Remembering it never fails to give me goosebumps and a sense of fear. I've never been able to explain it. I never watched horror movies or had anything to do with ghosts and the paranormal, so whatever I saw that night was 100% new to me. Has anyone ever experienced seeing similar apparitions to this? Or does anyone know if this sighting has any meaning? Either way, I have never been more terrified in my entire life. In a sense, I was living in an older home. This home had at least one verified death. Many strange occurrences took place, such as my cat being locked in the bathroom every night. It was a Jack and Jill bathroom. I would ensure the doors were either closed or both open, yet he still ended up locked inside, blinds turning in the opposite direction from how I left them, and objects falling off walls or disappearing. At some point, I decided I would no longer live there. Upon making this decision, I informed the house, "Please, feel free to take whatever you desire, I will be moving." All activity ceased until I began packing. After being packed, or rather while packing, objects in boxes that were sealed would begin rattling in the boxes, almost every box, every day until I moved. In Galveston visiting friends. Their pets slept with me and often looked past the couch I was sleeping on, and their eyes followed from right to left as someone was walking past us. Every night the ducking lights would turn on above me as I slept. I would hear footsteps and shit moving around in the living room. The cat and dog would look and follow their heads towards something like they were seeing something. When I went to the kitchen to get water, the lights would turn on. After a week I followed the noise and calmly asked, "What the duck is wrong with you?" Nothing happened after, but I was afraid of bringing it home to Alaska somehow or some way. I still had a great time in Galveston. I now believe in ghosts after being a 33-year-old non-believer. A creepy spirit interacted with my toddler. I bought my first house at the age of 22, shortly after my son was born. I had just moved to the South and fell in love with old plantation homes, so it made sense for me to buy my own. It was a gorgeous, huge brick colonial, and it was also a foreclosure, so I got it super cheap. However, it sat vacant for many years and needed to pretty much be gutted and completely redone. My husband and I couldn't wait to start construction. Unfortunately, as soon as we started renovating, that's when weird little things started happening. Floors creaking, things moved or missing, nothing too bad. I've always been open to the paranormal, so I didn't think too much of it until my son was involved. It was just my son and I home, and our family doggo. I was in the laundry room, and my son was in the living room, which was right by the laundry room. I could see him from the room while folding clothes. I turned my back for a moment to load the dryer, and when I looked back, my son was no longer playing on the floor. Instead, I could hear him babbling to someone. He was sitting on the staircase, and before I could get to him, I overheard him say something to the effect of "I don't want to play now," and it was directed to someone clearly upstairs. I just kind of brushed it off and brought him back into the living room with me and turned on some cartoons. Not even 5 minutes later, out of the blue, all these balls from an inflatable ball pit come flying down the stairs and roll into the living room right by where he is sitting. At this point I am freaking the hell out, so I load him and the dog up, and we play at the park until my husband is off work. We had a ton more legit encounters, but nothing that scared me like this. From our living room, if you're sitting at the end of the couch, you can see directly into the kitchen, where I have a baker's rack, and on the bottom of it is a wine rack. One night it was just the hubby and me lying on the couch, and we saw a wine bottle just come off the rack, land gracefully on the kitchen floor, and start spinning. Super weird. It turns out that the house went into foreclosure because the previous owner died on the same day my son was born, nearly at the exact hour. Something tells me she never left her home. During my vacation, I visited my parents for a few weeks and brought along my young female cat, who sadly passed away from cancer later. My parents had one little dog and a female cat. The cats avoided each other. So one late morning, I came back to my parents' apartment from a walk with their dog, and when we came in, I saw my cat dash out of my room, hair raised, my parents' cat watching her from the corridor where she was standing. There was no way they were fighting. I get to my room to see if she maybe ran out because something fell and it nearly hit her. Nothing. I saw her at the door, she wouldn't come in, scared as hell and looking at a point over my bed, growling, which was unusual for her, and ran away again. I often sensed something strange about my room, so I quickly concluded that she was seeing something I could not. And I'm the kind of pet owner, more like they own me, really, who considers them to be their children. She, the other female cat, and the dog were my babies. So the mama bear in me was triggered. I yelled toward the spot she was staring at, insisting that whoever or whatever was there needed to leave immediately because I wouldn't tolerate any further scares for my cat. I meant it very convincingly from the depth of my heart, and my protective mode made me unafraid. 5 minutes later she came by the doorstep again. She looked at the point over my bed where she had seen something before. She must have seen nothing there anymore because she finally entered my room. About 15 years ago I was getting ready for bed, turning off all of the lights one by one. The light in my bedroom was on, so I was turning off all other lights and going to my room. I picked up my cat like a baby and turned off the last light in the living room. It was a straight shot to my bedroom with nothing obstructing the way. As I was passing my couch, with my cat in my arms, I bounced off of something that wasn't there. Like, literally. Imagine someone walking directly into a wall, but the wall is invisible. Even stranger, the moment I collided with whatever it was. I got a rushing wave of heat all through my body starting from my toes to my head, and then immediately an ice-cold chill from the top of my head all the way down to my toes. My cat reacted with a long, stressed-sounding meow, indicating he sensed something was off too. I have never experienced anything like this again since that moment. I was just wondering if anyone else out there ever had something similar happen. It scared me so much that I slept with the lights on for the better part of 2 weeks. My parents have owned the same home my entire life. In this house, many strange occurrences have taken place, such as all the silverware going missing, the vacuum cleaner being hidden, and my witnessing a light bulb explode, which scared me so much that I ran out of the house. When I went back in, the bulb was completely intact with nothing wrong with it. As a child there was always a heavy presence in my bedroom. I could never sleep, had nightmares, and was always terrified, and I remember being very, very young and visualizing a protective force field around myself and family at night, before I even knew what that was. Despite having a Christian upbringing, I began using salt under my bed at the age of 12. Many guests feel uneasy in my childhood bedroom and tell stories about doors closing by themselves and seeing things. A few years ago, while my parents were on vacation, I was house sitting and brought along a friend who had extremely satanic beliefs to hang out. While I was house sitting, my friend began taunting the spirit, screaming profanities at it, and telling it that it couldn't mess with her. About 20 minutes later, while we were on the porch, I noticed a rushing water sound from inside the house. I went inside, and I found that the entire kitchen was flooded with at least an inch of water. It was so bad that the ceilings in the basement were caving in. It was a truly horrific moment for me, as I grew up in that home, and it held great significance for all of us. I fully believe this happened because of her taunting and her very negative, evil energy. My parents would never have accepted her in their home because she was involved in sacrifice and darkness. I believe it was my punishment for poor decision making, and I've never brought anyone there since. I experienced a profound sense of death when confronted by a shadowy figure. This occurred about 17 years ago when I was a kid, but I remember this day like it was yesterday. For context, I slept in the same room with my brother, with his bed next to mine. One night my mother and I finished praying before I went off to bed. Everything seemed normal up until I started getting a weird vibe. As time passed, this feeling got stronger, and I couldn't understand what was going on. I looked around my dark room only to find this shadow person at the end of my bed. I couldn't see past this figure, which was blacker than the darkness of my room. Immediately I felt the feeling of death once I looked at it. I got scared and hid under the covers, thinking it would go away. I let a minute pass and checked again. This figure was on the side of my bed, in between my brother's bed and mine. I was shocked to even be seeing what I was seeing at the time, so my only reaction was to punch it out of self-defense. As crazy as it may sound, I felt my fist make contact with this thing. I thought it was going to hurt me. Luckily, when I punched it, it slowly disappeared as it was moving away. Luckily, this was the only time I've witnessed this thing, and it's a good thing it never came back. I used to live in a one-bed apartment in Monterey, California, during my college years. Cabinets and drawers in the kitchen would open while I was out. No biggie, honestly just annoying. Then I started sensing a shadow figure as I slept. It would stand at the foot of my bed or next to the side of my bed, and I would start to wake up and notice it, but it would disappear once my eyes actually opened. I worked at Starbucks at the time and worked the opening shift, 4 a.m. to 1 p.m., plus school and extracurricular activities. So I was always worn out. The final straw was when I had a day off, could finally catch up on sleep, and was out like a light. I opened my eyes briefly around 5 a.m., and the shadow figure was standing next to me on the side of the bed. This time I could make out that it was a man in a trench coat and a fedora hat, 30s Humphrey Bogart style. When I forced my eyes open, realizing what I was processing, it darted into my bathroom and slammed the door shut. I was pissed about losing that sleep I so desperately needed, so I lost my shit. I stomped around my apartment yelling, "That's it. I've had it. You have to go. I don't care what happened to you, and I don't care what you want. You messed with my sleep, so you have to go," yelled and stomped for probably an hour. Never saw him again, no other activity after that. Don't mess with my sleep. I have had quite a few interactions with deceased loved ones. But my first ever paranormal experience was when I was around 5 years old. My family had moved into a house that an elderly lady died in, and it took a while before she was found. This experience left the entire downstairs in ruins. I later learned that my mother and aunts experienced paranormal activity that they hid from me because they did not consider it age appropriate. Meanwhile, I was having my own issues with her, from seeing full body apparitions to her showing up on reflective surfaces behind me, and one night, she was creeping up on me and leaning in to growl right into my ear. I am considerably older now, and to this day, I am unable to sleep with my ears uncovered because of that. Another incident was when I was around 11 and my beloved parakeet died. I was really heartbroken. Within a month or so, every time I entered my finished basement, I could clearly hear her squawking. Anyone that ever had a parakeet knows this noise well. I would ignore it, and then one day, a neighborhood friend was over, and she mentioned hearing my bird down there. That put me on edge. Then a while later I had a friend over from school, and she too claimed to hear it. Now it could be assumed they shared notes, but they didn't. They hated each other and basically would have nothing to do with each other or come over if the other was there. When I was 12, I came face to face with another entity that I later suspected may have been a poltergeist. I was asleep, and it was early morning hours with the sun shining into my windows. I kept feeling someone stroking my ankle area and mumbled, "Stop." There was a pause, and then they started again. At this point I bolted upright and angrily shouted, "I said stop." Then I froze. At the end of the bed, with their hands still on my ankle, was this dark gray figure. It had its head tilted as if confused by my reaction. It slowly let go of my ankle, and it had long wispy arms, and it then floated up to the corner of my room and dissipated. I had another run-in with it when I was 14, and that time I tried to punch it out, but my fist went through it. I tried to tell people about this incident and did not feel believed. That's when I started pounding the pavement, hitting the library to try to learn about these things. This was back when you had card catalogs, regular books, and no internet, and paranormal and occult books were pretty limited. From that point on I still had experiences, but I had a deeper understanding of them and knew how to deal with them better. I think the start of it helped lead me to my path in life, as I am a pagan/practicing witch. Anyhow, I am sure you are going to get a lot of very interesting stories here. I would like to share this account from a friend. He used to work in a retail shop with 3 floors. Among the staff, it was common knowledge that a shape-shifting entity wandered around the 3rd floor. It often took on the form of employees who weren't actually there, fooling others into thinking it was them. One day, a newly hired supervisor was warned about the spirit. At first, he was intrigued. But eventually, he had his encounter. It happened late one night during closing. The entity had taken the form of an employee. According to him, he saw the figure just standing there motionless, then slowly walking away in a certain direction. Then suddenly, that entity shoved a good ton of the office equipment stuff, which was on the desk, to the floor. The supervisor, already in a bad mood and trying to finish a report, knew something was off. The employee he saw was supposed to be on sick leave that day. Irritated and distracted, he finally snapped. He stood up from his desk, grabbed a thick record book, and hurled it directly at the shapeshifter, hitting it hard. Then he unleashed every curse word he could think of, shouting, You picked the wrong time to mess with me." He wasn't afraid. He was done with it. He was ready to confront it and teach it a lesson, no matter what happened. As he advanced toward it, the figure began moving toward a corner and then vanished. Before leaving, the supervisor shouted another warning: if it tried anything like that again, he wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to get rid of it. After that night, the sighting stopped. No one reported seeing the shapeshifter again. The strange activity on the third floor simply ceased. Now, that got me wondering. Have you ever encountered a similar situation, or do you know anyone who has encountered something similar and acted that way? That wasn't my dog. Tonight, 2:55 to 3:00 am-ish, I was sitting on my couch eating a popsicle and scrolling on my socials. My normal sleep schedule has me up this late. My dog walked out of my bedroom, which is about 6 feet from where I am, with a small, slight turn. He stopped to look at me. I can reach out and pet him if chosen. Understand he is super social and a Velcro dog, so I thought he woke up, noticed I wasn't in the room, and wanted to lie with me. I called him and reached out. He moved away with a grunt and walked a few more steps past me to his blanket and lay down. I can see him in his spot curled up, and in that moment I decided I was cold and done with the living room. I stood up and walked the few steps to my room. I walk in and find my dog sandwiched in between my partner's arms, lying on his side, snoring softly. There is no way he could do that in the 30 seconds it took me to get up and go in the room. So what did I try to interact with? Doppelganger encounter. Just 3 days ago, I and my friend went up to Walmart. There's this pavement trail up by my neighborhood basketball court, and all of a sudden, 3 people almost practically materialized in front of us. At first, we took it for granted, given the frequent use of the trail. However, upon closer inspection, the people looked just like our 3 friends, down to an exact point. Normally I would have no problem with this, however, one of the friends had gone to Georgia, and the others were at their house. Around this point we got creeped out, but oh well, might as well keep going. We get about halfway up the trail, and one of our friends' voices calls out, the voice being exact in cadence, tone, you name it. This is where things got weirder. My friend and I both turned to each other and asked if that was really our friend. From there we braced ourselves for a silly jump scare and turned the corner of the trail, and they were gone. We kept going and saw them again, this time in a home goods parking lot on the way there. We were able to get a good look at them, as we were far enough away to not be detected but close enough to get details. I saw one of them, our younger friend of the group, standing at an angle. I checked his face for identifiable features, but there was no face. I mean, there were no features whatsoever on his face. It mortified me. The others turned around a little bit at the same angle as they were preparing to get to the next part of the trail that led directly to Walmart. Their faces were all contorted. I mean, their faces were contorted in a way that seemed physically impossible. Then I realized they were following a particular pathway we followed about a month ago. I mean, they were following the same specific details as us, including foot placement and the arrangement of people. They rounded the corner, and we followed not far behind. They were gone. Entirely gone. I mean, no trace, nothing. Like they didn't exist. I brought this up with one of the friends we supposedly encountered, and she freaked out. She was more freaked out by the fact that them taking the trail meant they were nearby than anything else. It's become a taboo topic, but I think they've followed me home. Just today I was taking out the garbage, and down through this alleyway there was a voice speaking to me. It was that same friend's voice, but just ever so noticeably yet slightly distorted. I turned, and there were 3 figures shrouded in shadow. Their outlines were the same as those of the very friends I had encountered. Needless to say, I finished taking out the trash at lightning speed. I don't really see the situation as anything extreme right now, I'm more just looking for closure on what happened. I don't need anything immediately right now. If anyone has an answer, and I know someone does, please let me know. Thanks so much. Yes, many times. One in particular was a male who lived in the attic of our old apartment. We were the only unit with access to the attic. We were painting the bedroom and heard knocking from the other side of the attic door. I started asking yes or no questions, changing up the knock count for each answer. Each time was answered appropriately and intelligently. It was the most accurate conversation I've ever had with spirit in my 15 years of working with them. When we were about to leave, I told him to knock 4 times if he would miss me, and he did. I offered him the choice to move on and be at peace, or to knock twice if he wanted to stay. He chose to stay. I often think about him. My first, and only, ghost interaction? Although I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, this experience left me deeply shaken. Please remember this happened when I was just 7 years old, so some details may be off from my actual experience. A couple of weeks, or months, after my eldest cousin ended himself, I had begun sleeping in the recliner in my living room. I was woken up at about 7 or 8 in the morning by someone gently brushing their fingers against my face, creating a tickling sensation. I naturally reached out and grabbed the arm of whoever was touching me. I felt the rough fabric of my cousin's uniform. He went through basic training in the Air Force, that he was buried in. I released them, rubbing my eyes and looking over to my right where I had grabbed the phantom arm. I expected to see my dad or older sister, hoping that there was someone, anyone, who was just doing this to mess with me. But the space was empty. My heart was pounding in my chest. What the hell was that? So I covered my body in the blanket as quickly as I could, the tickling sensation traveling down to my ribs. I knew there was nobody there, though. After a minute or so, I quickly uncovered my head, and the tickling stopped. Thereafter, I just sat there trying to figure out if I hadn't just imagined the whole experience, but deep down I knew that it was real. My ongoing encounters with a ghost I met when I was in the 7th grade. I, 21F, just want to start this out by saying, yes, I've gone to the psychics and blessed the house, and none of the things I've tried have gotten this spiritual attachment to break. The man in the mirror has been attached to my soul for the last 8 to 9 years. It started at 2 a.m. My family was living at my grandparents' house due to us moving to another house and being in between the process. I stayed in an upstairs bedroom that was next to my grandparents' bedroom. In the room there was a mirror beside the bed, nailed into the wall. I remember I was watching a movie before I went to bed, and I just felt like something was off. I had a camping lantern next to me because I was so afraid of the dark in the house. Then sooner than I knew, there was a handprint, larger than any handprint I've seen in the house. It couldn't have been anyone else's hand on the mirror, because I saw it place itself on the glass. I stood back, frightened. Wondering what just happened, I then did something I should have never even thought about. I spoke to the mirror. Is anyone there? If so, please make a Y on the mirror so I know. Or write N for no. The mirror responded with a Y and a drawing. The minute I turned away because my grandpa got up to go to the bathroom across the hall. I saw his face. It was a Native American man, with a feather crown on his head and beads going down his shoulders. This is the man who has been haunting me since. We called him King, because I didn't know what else to call him. He will play with my lights and write my name on mirrors when I'm in a bathroom by myself or home alone. That's when I figured out from research that my grandparents' house was built on top of a Native American burial site that was used for the Shoshone tribe. Last night, I saw him again, in the mirror of my bedroom, looking at me, gazing into my soul with his piercing, almost black irises. My husband was asleep, and I turned the mirror around because I was afraid of him. That's when my chest became heavy, like someone was pushing down on it. I couldn't breathe. My husband woke up and pulled me away from it, but I was so afraid. So scared that this haunting has turned for the worse. Please give me some knowledge on what to do and how to sever the bond that I mistakenly made with a man that no longer roams the mortal plane. I have had interactions with quite a few over the course of my life. It has led me to being interested in the paranormal and the occult. I moved to my current home in 2013. Prior to this I lived by a woman in her 50s who was a divorced mother of 2 kids. She taught me astrology, and I would do her hair for free since I was a stylist. Unfortunately, she had a stroke and lost her home. She gave me all her old astrology books and a bunch of old occult books that belonged to her ex. I went and took everything I could before she left for good. After I got home I went through the books and found one that I really didn't know what to make of. I skimmed through the book and realized it was about working with demons. It was written in a way that was difficult to understand. I didn't think about it much and tossed it in my nightstand. I got a lot of great books from her, and I still have most of them today. About 6 months later we moved into an old 3-story house built in the 1920s, and my brother was going to move in and rent the basement. We put a lot of stuff in the basement as we unloaded the furniture. We all slept upstairs for a few days as we unpacked everything and got settled. A few days later my brother was setting up the basement to sleep in. He was down there for a few days and then asked if my little dogs could sleep with him in the basement due to how creepy it was. I told him that was fine, and then he slept down there for a few days with the dogs. One morning he was visibly weirded out when he came up and said that he had just had a dream that scared him. He said that he heard a very loud voice unlike one he had heard before and that it was telling him to off my dogs. The voice was so scary, he said he started to wake up and realize he was dreaming, but it kept talking to him. He said the last thing it said was, "You need to use the key, only a human can use it." He woke up and ran upstairs after that to tell me. I immediately thought, oh shit, the book in my nightstand. The nightstand was still in the basement. It still had the book in it. The book was an old copy of the Keys of Solomon. I gave it to my friend Jake, and he still has it. Apparition in an old condemned house. When I was 11, we moved into an old house for 6 months. It was soon to be demolished and rezoned into commercial shops. This little house named Harriet's Corner was huge, as it had an extension. The house sat opposite a church and next to a big car park that led to all the shops in the small town. It was the only house left on the block, as they had all met with the same fate. We found out it was one of the earlier cottages built in the area. We fell in love with this little house. It was rickety and unkempt, but we made it home. The first night we stayed there, I slept on my mattress on the floor in a front room that I claimed as my bedroom. Out my window I could see the church. I fell asleep quickly and woke up in the middle of the night, wide awake. Nothing ever woke me, I just wake up from time to time as if my internal clock was telling me to get up. It was after I woke that I heard it. I heard a scraping sound on the hallway walls and footsteps starting at the front door, which passed by my door and my parents' door directly opposite mine. Continuing down the hall, the scraping would fade until where the extension started, and it would abruptly stop. It was as if someone was coming in through the front door, slowly walking down the hall with their arms outstretched, scratching on the walls. I was terrified, and the interruption seemed to make it worse. The scraping would come back up the hallway and stop outside my door. Too scared to look, I spent the night hiding under the blankets till I fell asleep. The next night and every night after, I made sure my door was closed. This was a first, as I normally always had my door open. Being young, it made me feel more secure. My parents asked me why, I just told them I felt like having it closed. Whenever I wake, I experience the very same thing. My door is now closed. I felt safer, though, but when I did get scared, the spirit in that house could sense it and would walk back and stand in my room or simply stop at my door on the way. It was nerve-wracking, and eventually I'd call out for my mom. I'd tell her what was happening. After a few times, I was told I had to stop calling for her in the night. They were fed up. I told them someone walked the hallway, and they jokingly named it the creeper. Didn't help. One night I decided to confront it. I grabbed my blue guitar by the neck and held it over my head. I waited for the creeper to reach the end of the hall and open the door, stepping out into the hallway. Looking down it, I saw a swirling shadow figure move swiftly into the bathroom, which was the last room before the extension started. I ran into my parents' room still brandishing the guitar. My mom's partner was sleeping on the door side. The guitar hit the doorway as I entered, ringing out, waking him, and he freaked out. I saw what I thought was a dark figure holding a dark object in its hands, as if it were ready to strike. I freaked out when he freaked out and ran back into my room. It continued to happen, but I stopped myself from reacting to it and simply ignored whatever it was. We moved out, and the old cottage house was torn down and replaced with Harriet's arcade. A very similar phenomenon happened to my mom and her brothers in an old family home they lived in. I'll share that story another time. Should I be concerned about what I'm experiencing? About a week ago, I was in my bathroom and heard somebody I knew ask if I was okay from right outside the door. I replied yes, but it turns out that the person I heard was actually on the other side of the house in a closed room, not right outside the door as I initially thought. I am unsure whether this is a ghost or something sinister. The entities seem capable of interacting with objects such as bath faucets and switches. When I have seen them, one appears as a very tall shadow man, while the other resembles a childlike figure. Several people have also witnessed these two figures. I've heard a little girl laughing/talking outside of my kitchen window, and I live in a closed-off area. Somebody has also heard this exact same thing outside the window on a different occasion. I'm also feeling things touch or breathe on me and other people. If anybody knows what these things are or has any questions/comments, feel free to respond. My son saw something ghostly, and it scared him greatly. What was it? My 11-year-old son found a BB gun in the basement as I was cleaning up. He took it outside on the porch, and as he walked out, he saw a white ghostly figure standing on two legs, like a human. It was all white except from the neck down to the waist, which was opaque, as this figure looked like it was wearing a coat that wasn't zipped up. Only a small portion of this color was the rest was white. My son ran into the house, stated, "What was that?" slammed the door, and screamed, "Mom." I've never seen my son react to anything of this nature except for that night. My son also states that as soon as he saw the figure and the figure noticed my son saw it, it ran so fast down towards the creek. This thing also left a wide area of weeds that were laid down and looked chewed up as if a bear was bedding and hanging out there. But this is not the case, this is no bear. I have lived in the same residence for 4 years. I've seen bears. It is not a bear that is doing this. Did this follow me home? Is it a threat? A spirit spoke through me. I haven't told many people about this experience, but it seems like this would be a good place to share. This happened about 20 years ago when I was 14. My friend's mother was very into the paranormal world, and one night we, myself, my friend, her mom, and a few other friends, decided we wanted to use their Ouija board. We turned off all of the lights in the house but lit a couple of candles on either side of the board, which we had sitting on their coffee table. We all sat in a circle while her mom told us a few rules about the board. Suddenly my friend goes, "Let's do a seance." Her mom tells us to all join hands, and no matter what happens, do not break the circle. Her mom starts asking if there was anyone with us, if any spirits would like to communicate with us, etc. A few minutes went by, and we heard a huge crashing sound come from my friend's room, followed by what sounded like people walking around in the bedroom. We all look at Laura, my friend's mom, and she yells out, "Hello?" Another loud crash, and we hear someone say, "Shh," and then all of a sudden my entire right side goes completely ice cold. Tears start streaming down my face. I have no idea why I'm crying. I look at my friend's mom and say, "Everything will be alright, Laura." I lean in and blow out the candle that was sitting in front of me. Laura gasps, starts crying, and backs up from the table. My friend runs to turn on the light. She looks at me and says, "Why did you say her name like that?" When I say Laura, I pronounce it as Laura. However, when I spoke to her, I pronounced it Lowww, similar to the last name Lowry, which sounds like Lauru. I told my friend I wasn't sure why I had done any of that just now, but that it didn't feel like I was in control for a minute. Almost like someone else was steering. She then tells me that I said her mom's name exactly like her mom's ex, Dale, used to say her name. Her mom told us that Dale was crazy and even tried to end her at the end of their relationship. Dale was killed in a motorcycle accident 5 years ago. We were so freaked out. Then my friend wanted to check her bedroom, where we had heard the crashing sounds. Upon entering, we found her mattress, box spring, and frame scattered throughout the room, and her nightstand toppled over. I still get chills when I think about that night, such a strange experience, and it definitely made me a believer. 2 children used to visit me. Growing up I experienced a lot of paranormal activities. I'm unsure whether these were real experiences or just my child mind making up illusions. One particular ongoing interaction stood out to me, 20 female, because I still lie awake at night trying to make sense of it. When I was around maybe 5 to 7, these 2 kids would visit me. They seemed slightly older than me, maybe 9 and 10 years old. The 2 kids were a girl and a boy. I shared a bedroom with my sister, who would always fall asleep before me. They came soon after she would fall asleep. They would ask me how my day was and how I was. Every night before they left, they would give me a ball of dim light. I couldn't feel the ball of dim light, but if I placed it between my hands, it would remain there. However, when I moved my hands away, it would vanish into the dark room. They would tell me not to tell anyone they were seeing me. This continued for what felt like several years. For several years, it was the same routine every night, and I began anticipating their visits and the pretty orb of light. The last time I saw them was when they visited me and had the standard conversation. But they followed this with, "We have to go and won't be able to see you anymore, we will see you soon." They gave me the orb of light, and I never saw them again. Today I think about it and the chance of the interaction being real. What was that orb of light? Why did they visit me? Why couldn't I tell anyone? What did they mean when they said they would see me soon? I hope one day I get an answer, and I wonder if anyone has ever had a similar experience. Of all the ghostly interactions I've had, this was the scariest. In my lifetime, I've had a handful of ghostly interactions. However, one particular experience continues to frighten me to this day. For 1 year during high school, I moved in with my grandparents in Florida. I stayed in one of their upstairs guest rooms. After a few nights I started having horrible night terrors about someone trying to claw their way out of the closet. The spirit in question was a negative, horrible, and malicious one. Its presence was heavy and depressing. Night after night, I would lie paralyzed in bed, aware that I was not alone, as this negative energy poured out of the closet. It was so scary I physically couldn't move my body to leave the room. I would cry in panic under the covers, unknowingly feeding it and strengthening it. After a few weeks of this, I had a psychic come bless the house. Immediately she walks in and goes straight upstairs to the closet in the guest bedroom. She said there is definitely something there. And it is not friendly. She used holy water and cleansed everything. Put crosses on all the mirrors and doorways. Said a few prayers. And after that day, the nightmares and negative energy completely stopped. I was shook. So being the investigative person I am, I started researching the history of the house. Come to find out it was bought at a foreclosure auction. Based on the information I gathered, it appeared to be used as a stash house for either immigrants or human trafficking. Still unsure. Then I noticed that the lock on the guest bedroom door, as well as the lock on the closet, could only be locked from the outside. I'm not sure what exactly went down in that room, but it must have been horrible. The lake I grew up near had a demon fish in it. People always wrote it off as kids being dumb/crazy, but we saw it on multiple occasions. A massive, ugly, malformed thing with a mouth of the nastiest teeth you've ever seen. Me and my buddy Todd would float out on his wooden/pontoon raft and just watch the water, looking for it. And then one day our friend Carla almost lost a toe while swimming. Huge gashes and cuts on her foot, like someone took a broken bottle to it. So a bunch of parents thought it was caused by glass or something and did a big cleanup of the lake. Even replacing the beach's sand entirely. But we knew what it was. A horror from the abyss. A scale-covered nightmare we occasionally saw in the distance. About 9 years later, long after I had moved away, I ran into my old buddy Todd at a Walmart, and he told me it apparently washed up dead on the beach. A half-rotted pike, or maybe a gar, the size of a small child. But it was all mangled up like it had birth defects. It's weird to feel a sense of relief, a rush of I told you so, almost a decade after something happened. But the spookiest part of the story was that he told me, it looked like something had taken a huge bite out of it. I'm not sure if he was ducking with me, but I still don't swim in lakes or rivers anymore. My 2 friends and I saw a ghost train. So this was about 6 years ago, around January, I believe. I was with 2 lifelong friends. We decided to go do something before we all shipped off to the military. I was going to be the first to ship out a few months after this. We started off hanging out at one friend's grandma's house. We eventually got bored and decided to drive down to a river located in the mountains of West Virginia. So the way this is set up, we had the road up the hill, then a small patch of woods to walk through, probably 20 meters of woods, then it opened up to a railroad track. Below the railroad track down a steep gravel hill was the riverbank. So, it was dark, we parked the car on the road and walked down to the river, crossing the railroad. We didn't really have a plan, we just built a small fire on the riverbank and sat around repeating inside jokes and laughing about dumb stuff we did when we were younger. We couldn't have been there longer than 15 minutes when we heard a man yelling. Though we couldn't make out any words, the yelling sounded like he was yelling in a defensive manner. So we looked around and couldn't see anything. We heard it again and decided to stomp out the fire and sit there quietly and listen. After a few minutes went by, we decided to leave. So we made our way up the steep, so steep we basically had to crawl up it, gravel hill to the railroad tracks. We got to the top where we were about to cross the tracks, but we heard the sound of an engine getting closer, so we decided to get on our bellies and wait the train out. We didn't want to get caught on railroad property because it's a no trespass area. Anyway, we saw lights coming, and we even saw smoke coming from the engine, weird since they don't use steam engines anymore, but we thought nothing of it and kept waiting. We waited for maybe 30 seconds to a minute when we heard the same noise from earlier. We looked around again and saw nothing. When we turned back, the train was no longer headed toward us, it was just gone. We saw that it was clear and just crossed the tracks, went back up the hill through the woods, and slept in the car. We ended up leaving in the morning and never really thought much of it. Then the next evening we finally brought up how weird it was that a whole train just disappeared, and we questioned why we just didn't leave. Fast forward to 2 to 3 years later, I was in the military at this point and was back home in West Virginia for leave. I went to a bookstore with my dad and brother, and I went to the horror section. I saw a subsection with local books. I picked up one that was called something along the lines of West Virginia Legends. I don't remember the exact title. I flipped past a few pages and landed on one section called Ghost Trains in West Virginia. I immediately closed the book and sat it down. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, and we still talk about it to this day. I really don't understand why we dismissed it until the next day, as it was extremely strange. Furthermore, note the way this particular track was set up. The way it ran was parallel to the river and the road going around the mountain. There was no fork in the tracks, and it could not have turned anywhere due to being right in between a road/mountain and a river. Please let me know what you guys think. I'm not really sure how a train could be a ghost. I submitted this to a paranormal group, and they suggested that we might have experienced a time slip. I don't really know, I'm not super into paranormal stuff but would love to hear some opinions about what you guys think it could have been. Working at the La Laurie house. A few years ago, I was experiencing financial difficulties and sought any job that offered a reasonable salary and flexible work hours. I used to work as a housekeeper, and quite honestly, it was something I was hoping would come up as a job opportunity. At that time, I was residing in Vichery, Louisiana, a distant location from the bustling city of New Orleans. Lucky for me, a friend of mine told me about a small housekeeping job her boss had mentioned. They were looking for someone to come in twice a week to clean the first and second floors of this house, which was located downtown in New Orleans. To fast forward things a bit, I ended up going down to the place, a huge, beautiful French home literally in the heart of NOLA, and got the job. The first day was vanilla. Nothing but work, you know? I did what I was there to do, and as I got ready to leave, I got a whiff of this horrible stench. Almost like burnt rotten meat. I thought to myself, shit, did I forget to take out the trash? So I ran to the kitchen, and the smell faded. I kept checking but couldn't locate the source of the smell. After double-checking everything, I left. When I came back the day after, I was on the second floor dusting the parlor area when I heard chains being dragged on the floor. Initially, I was startled and dismissed the sound as coming from someone outside. But then I heard it again and again. It definitely was coming from inside the house, so I ran as fast as I could downstairs to tell the other housekeeper that somebody else could possibly be inside. It was only the two of us there that day. She just looked at me and told me to mind my own business and keep working. That was nothing. She was a mean old lady, but I shrugged it off and went back upstairs. Again, out of nowhere, that putrid stench of burnt rotten meat filled the air. It was very annoying because just like that, it randomly came and went. Some days you'd smell it downstairs, others upstairs. Later on that day while I was using the restroom, I heard this huge commotion upstairs on the third floor. I heard what sounded like a young girl screaming, followed by a woman chasing after her and saying, "Get in here." I literally was like, WTF? I opened the door and heard running upstairs, and then it stopped. The yelling, the screaming, everything. I went back downstairs, and at this point I was frustrated and told the other housekeeper what I had just heard. She looked at me, and she said, "You never hear anything, okay? It's best if you just go on as if you don't notice a thing." The thing is, she always assured me there was no one there. She consistently assured me that everything was fine. Needless to say, I was employed at that residence for an entire month, as that was the maximum duration I could endure. I had heard repetition of the same yelling, screaming, and chasing. Other days I'd hear chains dragging and dropping on the floor. What truly unsettled me was hearing a sudden cry of agony and despair while I was taking my lunch break on the second floor, followed by the sound of chains that seemed to come from the third floor. I panicked thinking someone was hurt and needed help, so as soon as I was getting up to go get help, I saw a tall dark man with chains around his neck, and just like that, I ran out of that house as quickly as possible. I never even told the person who hired me that I had no intentions of returning. I just stopped showing up. As rude as that seems, I could care less. I just wanted nothing to do with that place. Anyway, it wasn't until 4 years later, when I had long moved away from Louisiana, that I returned to New Orleans with my boyfriend on vacation. We chose to participate in one of their haunted history tours, and I must admit, when I saw that familiar building, my heart sank. Anxiety was building up inside me as the tour guide told the story of the building I once used to work at. And the horrible, tragic, malicious things that happened there. I felt so sick to my stomach that I begged my boyfriend and me to go back to the hotel. During my tenure at the renowned La Laurie mansion, I was entirely unaware of its historical significance. In fact, I had never even heard of it before. But after the tour facts and doing my research, everything I experienced there made sense. It still gives me goosebumps to this day remembering that day I heard Madame La Laurie chasing after what could have been a slave girl upstairs on the third floor. I'm almost positive it was her. Furthermore, I will add that the stench of rotten burnt meat could have been the spirits of the many slaves that ended by the hands of that evil woman. I met a ghost and didn't know until 10 years later. When I was 8 or 9, I accompanied my grandmother to her friend's home. Jessica was someone we knew from church, and I didn't know much about her other than that she had a grandson around my age. After my grandmother gave Jessica a gift of some sort, they started talking in the living room and let me wander through the huge house on my own. I found my way to a gorgeous staircase that was reminiscent of the kind you might find in old plantation houses. Shiny, clean, and really tall. I struggled to climb the first few steps because the steps increased in height drastically, and I had zero idea how an old lady like Jessica could ever begin to climb them. I was about a quarter of the way up the stairs when I heard someone with a very deep, gravelly voice say, "Hey, boy. Get down off those steps." At the top of the stairs was an incredibly tall man wearing a straw hat and leaning his shoulder against the wall. I'll never forget the way he looked at me. Not evil or cruel, but like a stern father or uncle. "Get down off those steps, boy. They're too tall for you. You come up those stairs and I'll give you a whipping." I immediately said, "Sorry," and sprinted back to my grandmother, who was ready to leave. I casually mentioned meeting the man upstairs to her, and she didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years, and it's a few weeks before my 20th birthday. My dad tells me that Jessica passed away and that we'd be attending the funeral. I was able to meet her grandson again, whom I hadn't seen in quite a long time, and after exchanging pleasantries, I mentioned the large man upstairs. He seemed confused and asked me what I meant, so I described in detail the tall, gravely voiced man in a straw hat who ordered me down from the stairs. This guy stared at me like I was a moron and said that sounds exactly like his grandfather, but he wasn't sure since the man had passed away around 30 years ago. The story was he fell down those stairs and died in hospital from the resulting brain injury. He then clarified to me that the upstairs was only one or two small rooms that Jessica never used and the stairs weren't changed when they remodeled the house for whatever reason. I didn't know what to say to this, so we casually went our separate ways. That funeral was about 7 years ago, and my own grandmother passed last year. I can still close my eyes and see his face, along with the sound of his deep, hoarse voice. I guess I should thank him, he didn't let me follow in his steps. My daughter has been seeing ghosts since she was a toddler. Ever since my daughter was the age of 2, she has been able to see things that I or no other family member could see. It was never anything ever scary, just little kids she would talk to, or that was what they would make themselves appear as. Fast forward to the year of 2018. My daughter was now 8 at the time. We had just moved into a new duplex apartment complex, me, my daughter, and my 3-year-old son, and everything seemed okay at first. Nothing was ever giving me bad vibes or anything like that. Furthermore, my daughter had not seen a ghost in over a year at this point. After about 2 months of staying there, I walk into my daughter's room one day, and she is talking to and playing with another little girl. I asked her the girl's name, and when she started seeing her, she responded that she met her last week, and she is a sad little girl. Now before I go any further, I just want to point out that I have never felt comfortable with her seeing the things she saw, and I never encouraged her to keep talking to them. In all honesty, I would tell her not to interact with them and tell them to leave her alone, but after years of going through it and seeing that nothing was harming her, I just got used to it and talked to her about the things she saw because, in reality, she couldn't help what she saw. Now back to the story. So after she told me about the little girl, I brushed it off and told her to be careful as always and to come to me and let me know if anything was ever wrong. After about a week or so I didn't hear about the little girl anymore, but I didn't think too much of it because they come and go. Also around this time, things started to feel different in the house, especially when my kids were gone for the weekend. At night it would feel as though someone was watching me, and I would hear things in the attic. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention it was an attic in the duplex, but I never went up there ever. Attics have always spooked me out. So one night after getting the kids into bed, I was watching TV and must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I heard my daughter screaming and crying at the top of her lungs. I immediately jumped out of bed thinking someone had broken into the house and ran straight for my kids' room. When I get to the room and turn on the light, my daughter is sitting up in bed, still screaming but looking in the corner of the other side of the room. I grab my son and her and ask her what is wrong, and she continues to scream and cry while pointing and asking, "Mommy, don't you see them?" I looked to where she was pointing to a blank room and immediately knew that she was seeing something, but this was different. I tried to calm her down and ask her what it was she was seeing. She then began to say, "Mommy, they are right there. All of them. Why can't you see them?" At that moment I began to panic, but I never showed my fear in front of her. I kept calm and asked her what they were doing. She then says they are playing instruments and laughing at her. She also says that they kept smiling at me, and she shouted at them to leave me alone. Then she finally looks at me and asks me what 666 means. At that moment it was like my whole body went into protection mode. You would think I was scared, but I immediately became enraged at the fact that my innocent child was being taunted by childish evil entities. I grabbed her hand and rushed to my room and locked the door and did the only thing I knew to do. I prayed and called my cousin, who came over to bless the room. After almost 2 hours of my child being scared and me trying to let her know nothing is going to harm her because she is protected by Jesus, she finally fell asleep in my bed. You might expect that after such a night, everything would settle down, but instead, it felt like I had angered one of them. So while my kids were sleeping in my bed, I had just fallen asleep when something told me to wake up. I immediately woke up, and for the first time ever, I saw a dark figure gliding over to where my daughter was sleeping, and before they could bend down to touch her, I shouted at them to leave her TF alone. Yeah, I had lost my mind because the figure came over me so fast, but I grabbed my Bible from under my pillow and started saying the Lord's Prayer, and it went away. After that night I moved out and left all the furniture because I didn't want anything attached to it, and we never went back. When my daughter was around 15 months old, we went on vacation. We chose to stay at an Airbnb, a place that was slightly off the usual tourist route. It was a cute little place, but the furniture was all quite outdated, and the whole place just had a feeling of having been lived in for quite a few decades. The only thing that really stood out to me, however, was a vanity in the room that we were staying in. It looked really old and had a mirror that just gave me the creeps when looking at it, but I brushed it off to my overactive imagination. We brought with us a night light that you have to physically touch to change the color of, and it cycles through around 12 different colors. We always have it on warm white. I woke up in the middle of the night, and the light had changed to red. I thought that was odd because the only way to get to red is to touch it around 10 times. The night light is also an alarm clock and sits on a surface. It was not sitting anywhere where anyone could easily bump it or touch it accidentally. I suspected it might be a short circuit, despite having used the light for over a year without any issues before. My daughter was just learning her first few words at that time. One word she knew quite well was hug, and she would often reach out to people with her arms and say, hug. However, she was very selective with who she would ask this from. A few nights into our stay, I was lying in bed reading to her when all of a sudden she turned her attention towards the vanity. She looked at it for a few seconds and then smiled and said hug while reaching her arms toward the vanity. I wasn't scared, I was just extremely annoyed. Without hesitation, I very firmly yelled, go away, in the direction of where my daughter was reaching. I always thought that I would feel extremely creeped out or scared if I thought I was experiencing something paranormal, but in that moment, all I felt was pissed off. I didn't appreciate that something I couldn't see might be interacting with my daughter. An encounter I had in Iceland. Hello. I had a bit of a late night watching horror movies, which caused me to remember a fun encounter I had a couple of years back, which kickstarted my interest in the paranormal. See, I had always been extremely skeptical about every scary video, every scary story, and about spirits in general, but this one encounter changed all of that for me. I was around 16 at a friend's house. It was a rather old home. It had stood in the city of Selfos for a very long time, but it never gave off those ooh haunted vibes. Anyway, there were about 8 of us at this friend's house having a normal get-together, no alcohol, so can't blame it on being drunk, when I decided I needed time alone to answer a couple of text messages inside the living room. The living room stood right next to the dining room, so all my friends were in plain view. It started with me feeling a light breeze on my neck and a chill. Then a minute went by, and clear as day, I heard a raspy old woman whisper into my ear, saying hello in Icelandic. I was startled, of course, because I had been deeply focused on my texting. I looked around, seeing no one in the same room as me. A minute goes by, and my friend walks through the door. It's important to note that the door was on the same side as the ear where I heard the whisper, so naturally, I asked him if he had been the one whispering through the door. He denied it, so I dismissed it and walked into the dining room, turning my back to the living room as I joined the others. I told the group that I'm going crazy and that I heard an old woman whisper. The owner of the house laughed and said, "No, you're not crazy, that's normal here. 4 people died in this house, an old woman and 3 men who had died of suicide." And as she finished saying that, my hoodie got tugged on, and multiple people had seen it get tugged on. And when I tell you I freaked out, man, I was like a man trying to shake a spider off me, ripping at my clothes and goosebumps all over my arms. Everyone was laughing at me like I was some dork. But after I was done ripping at my clothes like a lunatic, we heard heavy-set footsteps sprinting up the stairs. It sounded like heavy work boots, and after we heard the footsteps reach the top and run upstairs, a door slammed, and the footsteps ended. Everyone in that house was in that dining room, and we all sprinted upstairs to search if anyone had somehow run into the house and up the stairs, but no one was upstairs. We searched every single room. This entire encounter involved 8 witnesses, making it difficult for me to find any rational explanation for what happened. The door couldn't have slammed because of the wind, as it was the middle of summer with barely any wind outside. Now I have another story from the owner that I find wholesome, yet extremely creepy. She had reportedly once been awake near 1 to 2 a.m. on her phone alone at home when her door swung open with footsteps approaching her bed, and then she heard that same old woman whisper and ask her to go to sleep. Then her door closed and her lights shut off. I get a sort of protective feeling from that interaction. Like she told me, nothing ever violent has happened, and she has learned to live with these spirits. I truly wish now, with my interest in the paranormal, that I could go back, properly investigate, and see if I could communicate further, seeing as the spirit had greeted me. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my experience. Can paranormal entities manipulate us psychologically, and if they can, how far can they go with it? I lived in a really old house that was converted into 2 separate apartments. My family of 6 had the top 2 floors, while the first level was its own single apartment. My family, as well as the neighbors that were in and out fairly often in the apartment below, experienced a lot in our time there. We'd all seen and heard things, and one of our downstairs neighbors, who was a devout Christian, even said she was strangled by something while she slept one night. She chose to sleep on the porch because she refused to stay inside after that incident, and she hung holy water on both of our doors. Now what I want to know is, can paranormal beings alter the dreams we have? Can they even cause us to develop medical conditions? They can go as far as to speak to or touch us, but can they get inside of our heads too? I'm not sure if I'm making any sense, but while I was living in that house as a younger child, I had these wildly violent, demonic, or just dark and trippy dreams nearly every night that stopped after we'd moved. And I also began having epileptic fits, but only at night with no history of epilepsy whatsoever. I also stopped having them around the time we left. I think about this a lot, wondering if something was actively messing with me there, or if it was just a coincidence. I'm a direct descendant of the Whaley house, by blood, not just name, and the whole paranormal thing has been passed down generation to generation. My grandparents had it, my dad had it, and now I have it. I can give their stories later on, if you guys want. Well, with the background info out of the way, I've grown up with this stuff since I can remember. My not-so-imaginary friend I dubbed Jimmy. Now, I had an extremely lonely childhood, as I'm an only child and didn't take to people until my high school years. Jimmy would push me on the swing, watch movies with me, and was generally always with me. There's only one problem, though. He never left. As I grew up, he was always there. He might have faded away a bit, but he never left. I abandoned him, but he is still stuck on me. He got more violent as I got more distant. Eventually, I lost all memory of him, like it was erased. Then my family told me about him, and that's how I remember any of this stuff. I remembered having an imaginary friend. I didn't remember his name or anything about him, but I remembered he existed. Then the shadows changed to claws and all-out war. Now, I don't claim to be some kind of demon hunter. I'm the opposite, really. I'm just trying to get by these days. I don't even know what Jimmy is. All I know is that he isn't my friend anymore, and he never really was. He always wanted blood, and he left his mark, but that's for another story and another time. As I said, it's war between us now. He psychologically tormented me for years. He constantly woke me up when I was on the edge of sleep, distracted me during important tasks or any activity, pushed things over from upstairs while I was downstairs and vice versa, threw things at me, and even tried to drown me in both my bathtub and my pool. He drives my dogs insane, to the point I can't sleep with them in my room because they just bark constantly. One day, when I was on the computer in my kitchen, I realized I left my water in the living room. You can clearly see the living room from my kitchen via a bar area and an open doorway, and I turned around quickly to go get it, because I just generally move fast. There he was, all black, about 6 feet 5 inches. The instant I saw him, I got chills, but I also got furious. At this point, he'd been taunting and torturing me for about a year and a half, and I was sick of it. I knew he was watching, waiting for me to start cooking to splash oil on me or to get me somehow. What really got to me was that he was standing there, in full defiance of the light shining in from the bright day outside, absorbing it all and turning it into the deepest black you can imagine. So, with hatred in tow, I sprinted into the living room to where he was, and I screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "I'm sure, do something, you coward, don't wait. I'm right here in front of you, and I've had enough. This is me challenging you, right here, right now. This is the end. One of us leaves now." Then, I saw his eyes open, shining blood red, staring right at me, black pupils fully dilated. "So be it," he mumbled in a dry, hoarse, rocky, deep tone. He vanished, and I haven't seen him since, but he's still there, I know. He's just more careful because he knows I'm not afraid of him and that I will destroy him if I get the chance. I never ran from him, I just took it. Anytime something happens now, I'm there within seconds, ready to fight. He knows it. He spends his time in the attic now, over my room, or in the workout room or game room. He's never far, but he's learned to keep his distance. I don't know how I'd fight him, but willpower and hatred seem to do the job fairly well so far. A disembodied voice repeated what I said. What does this mean? Hello, I don't know much about the paranormal at all, so I am here to get clarity and ask advice. Tonight I was sitting in my living room, in a house I've lived in for 30 years and have never experienced anything like this, when my mom asked if I was ready to watch our TV show. I replied upbeat, MHM, and a few seconds later we both heard a disembodied voice reply MHM in the same tone as me. Honestly, I can't remember if it sounded exactly like me or just a similar tone, but needless to say, it has us both freaked out. What does this mean? Is this inherently a bad or evil thing? The only thing that is keeping me somewhat sane in this is Trist. It was upbeat and didn't sound explicitly evil. Is there any way I could have attracted this? I've been stressed out and having panic attacks. The only thing remotely spiritual I can think of is that I have been practicing conscious manifestation, but I tend to think of it more on a quantum mechanics level than spiritual. I don't think of myself as contacting spiritual guides when I do it. But could that be why? I have only been manifesting positive things like love, a relationship, and money, but not out of greed. Rather, I seek financial stability to avoid living paycheck to paycheck. If this is bad, what should I do, and how do I get rid of it? My sister mentioned mimics, and that has me freaked out. Please help. Thank you. Encounter with the light people. Hello, I recently had to think about an encounter I had 9 years ago while backpacking in New Zealand. I could never make much out of it, even trying to research it. But now finding a note I wrote, which said, "Never forget how real that night was," I thought maybe someone here has a clue what could have happened. My friend and I traveled in a small van through NZ and slept inside in search of new work and adventures. When we stayed in a town on the North Island, not far from the city center, next to a river with a boathouse, something happened to us. We had opened some cans of beer, listened to some music, and had deep and philosophical talks. Our car was standing on a little hill, under us was another car park and the boathouse, and behind that was the river. Out of nowhere a bright light appeared, 2 human-shaped beings were inside of it. The light itself came from them, there was no external light source, it was just them being bright. They were walking in our direction but not really focused on us. Despite having a little liquor in our tummies, my friend and I felt overwhelming fear for our lives, prompting us to start the engine of the car and get the hell out of there. The story continues, and the police even stopped us, taking us to another location because they might have known something was happening down there. I still wonder what happened. If they were angels, they sure were ducking scary. I was about 12 or 13 years old, as it was the night before my birthday. Anyway, I woke up, everybody in the house was asleep. I was thirsty, so I was about to get up from my bed when I looked down the hall to the place above the stairs. It was a huge open area, and smack in the middle of it was a long, white, human-shaped thing that I knew shouldn't be there. I immediately felt a tightness in my throat and became very scared. I looked away and tried to think of what it could possibly be. I couldn't think of anything. And so I sat there and thought. And thought and thought. Finally, I decided that I needed to know the truth, regardless of the outcome. If I saw a ghost, I would know. And if not, I can be in peace. Well, I sat up and looked straight at it. Just typing it gives me chills. It was a woman. No doubts about it. She was standing up in the air, about 8 feet or more above the ground, bottom of the stairs. Her feet were pointing down. She had slippers on. And long made-up hair that curled at the ends. She was wearing a gown. I am done describing her now. I can have a panic attack if I think about it enough. Anyway, I got my answer, and I really regretted doing that. I felt like I saw something I should have never seen, and I looked at it closely. It was as if I were gazing intently at the sun. I am scarred by that. It has been over 10 years. I don't think of it every day, but when I do, it bothers me a ton. Nothing else happened. I cried in silence and turned to face the wall, and eventually I must have passed out, because I wasn't sleepy. I woke up in the same position. It was light out, and my mom was downstairs. I ran so fast down those stairs and cried and cried. I told her what I saw. I could tell she didn't believe me, so I never told anyone again for years. I hated that house. I was glad to leave it. That's when I learned my childhood fears were real and wouldn't go away. This time I provoked something, but I didn't know I was doing it. It was about 5 years or more after that last story. I was 18. I lived in a different country, and I had grown up a lot. I never truly doubted my first encounter, but I have always been a skeptic, I have always been grounded, and I have always been an atheist. At this time I was grown up and brave and curious. However, I was also filled with frustration. I don't want to believe in ghosts. It is honestly my biggest nightmare. It just doesn't jive with the rest of my view of the world, and even worse, it's an ever-present fear, and I fear I may lose my mind if I get something horrible enough. But anyway, at this time I was very curious. I wanted some kind of proof so I can finally believe 100% as an adult. It was a Saturday, and I spent all day watching videos, trying to find one that may be authentic. I didn't. And I was frustrated and was debunking every video. Eventually I moved on to other things. Fast forward to about 5 in the afternoon, bright out. I was home alone, watching Pulp Fiction for the first time ever. It's Cali, I had no shirt or pants on, I'm also a bum at home. My friends called me to hang out, and since they were just down the street, I agreed and decided to walk over. I put on my pants and then go into the bedroom to grab my shirt. My closet is huge and covers the whole wall, and the doors are these big, heavy wooden doors that hang from rails up top. They always fell off the damned rails, and I didn't bother fixing it, as my siblings, who I shared the closet with, never ducking bothered fixing it. As I reach for a shirt on the far right side of the closet, the heavy door to my left, which is leaning against clothes and off its rails, suddenly slides toward me by about a foot without any apparent force pushing it. I heard it move. I saw the clothes shift. I heard it scraping against the carpet. I was ducking looking at it when it moved. I immediately jumped back, my shirt in hand, and that split second felt like forever. I remember feeling the hairs on the back of my neck, and I was pumped full of adrenaline. I barely felt my body. I screamed like a woman when I jumped back, then yelled, "What the duck was that?" And when I realized the question I was asking, I knew I didn't want a ducking answer. I ran out, shirtless, and left the ducking door open. I ran and met my friends and tried to stay cool, but they could tell I was ducking pale. I sat down, smoked a cigarette, and cried. I was crying in front of my friends when I was 18. They knew something was really wrong. About 10 minutes later I get a call from my mom. She's flipping out, worried about me. She came home, and the door was open, and I was gone. So I ran home. And when I came in and looked into my bedroom and that closet, I panicked. The door was closed, but I somehow collapsed and started crying and pushing back, as if trying to go through it. I have been through a lot in my short life. But this is the one time when I truly considered whether it was worth it. I love life, but I hate these things. And if they don't leave me alone, they may drive me insane. Anyway, there you go. Once, I stayed. The second time, I provoked it. I don't recommend you do either. Nowadays I'll tell you if I ask. I don't care about what people may think of me. I have seen enough. One night when I was younger, I was up late watching TV. I was the only person in the house that was still awake. It was normal for me to stay up late, I was a night owl as a teen. But the creepy part was when I heard the door leading to the garage creak open when it should have been locked. So I went to shut it and check it because it was late and we always locked it at night. I shut it and locked it. Then a second time the door creaked open. I hesitantly went to close it, and it was still locked but somehow came unlatched. I convinced myself it just didn't close all the way, so I went back to the TV room. I was still nervous because it was late and the door had never had issues closing before that. But shortly after I had sat back on the couch, I heard a voice say, "Let me know if you can hear me." It sounded like a male whispering it. It was the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. Has anyone else had something similar to this happen? It was over 10 years ago, and to be honest, I'm still trying to make sense of it. I think I and my friends have a spiritual attachment, and I'm not sure what to do about it. This is a more recent thing for us all, and strange things keep happening to all of us. It started with one of my friends seeing her brother sitting on the sofa in the dark late at night. When she confronted him about it the next morning, he had no idea what she was talking about. Then she started having weird dreams, which was odd, as she told us she never really dreams. Then weird things started happening to me. It started a couple of months ago when I heard my mom calling my name over and over again from outside my door. However, it woke me up, as it was quite late at night, so I ignored it and went back to sleep. When I asked her what she wanted last night, she had no idea what I was on about and said she was fast asleep at the time I heard her outside my bedroom door. This wasn't the last of this kind of thing happening to me or my friends. Over the past few months, I've heard my mom call my name when she wasn't home a couple of times. The last time it happened was the scariest. I asked her to lie in bed with me, as I felt off and was anxious about nothing, so she came into my room. Shortly after she left my room to get her phone, I heard her voice say "careful" in a snarky tone. A week after this, my mom heard me calling her name from outside her window. However, I was at my boyfriend's. The most recent incident occurred last week when I saw a shadow of someone outside my room and heard the sound of a bag rustling near my door. I assumed it was my mom, and I didn't think much of it until I got a message from my mom asking me to stop rustling. Ever since then my other friend has been experiencing strange things. She was out at the first friend's house, and the friend fell asleep. She then heard our friend, who was asleep, call her name out loud, but she hadn't, as she was asleep. More recently her mom went away, and she was left home alone. She heard her mom say her name and tell her to, shh. This was followed by footsteps in her mom's room, but nobody was home. We have played ghost games before, which we consider the only logical explanation for why this is happening to all of us. However, we are not sure if anyone has any ideas about what is going on or why. Please let me know. My aunt and uncle live in an ancient house in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Everyone knows the basic creepiness of an old house. Creaks, squeaks, stray breezes and the like. Apparently this house had a lot of bumps in the night. The house was originally the schoolhouse for a family that now has a hospital in the area named after them. My aunt and uncle had 2 children, a girl named Anna and an older son named Richie. One night when Anna was about 7 or 8, she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of her door creaking open. She looked up and saw a dark figure, but thinking it was only her father checking up on her, she rolled over and went back to sleep. A few nights later she woke up again in the middle of the night to the sound of someone rustling through her things on her dresser. She rolled over and saw the same dark figure. She thought it was her older brother Richie, so she sleepily asked him what he was doing, but he didn't respond, he just walked out of the room. The next morning at breakfast, Anna asked Richie what he was doing in the room the previous night, but he said that he hadn't gone in there. She told him that she knew he was lying because she clearly saw him over by her dresser, but he swore up and down that it wasn't him. Her mom and dad kind of just laughed, telling her that maybe it was a ghost. That next night she woke up again, but to the sound of her jewelry box on her dresser playing a song. She was pissed off, thinking that it was just Richie trying to scare her. She got up, closed the jewelry box, and turned around to get back in bed when she saw the same dark figure on the other side of her bed in front of the window. It blocked most of the light coming in through the window, but she could see through it. Needless to say, she freaked the duck out and turned on the light, and the figure was gone. She told her family about what she had seen, but they were very skeptical. She was quite young, and I guess they assumed that it was just her imagination. Although she never felt as though it was going to hurt her or felt threatened or anything, I can guess it was still really freaky to sleep in your room when you know there's something else in there with you. So from what my mom told me, she slept with her light on for many, many years, till she was in her late 30s and was married and living with her husband. But the story doesn't end here. You know how I said I was going to circle back? Well, here we go. My uncle was renovating one of the rooms on the 3rd floor of the house and was going to remove one of the walls. When he started taking the wall down, he found a few really old shotguns, some papers signed by a Brian, and a few pictures of a woman. Thinking they were pretty cool considering they were pretty old, they framed them and put them on their fireplace mantel. Now Anna was in her 20s when this discovery was made, and one day my mother decided to stop in and say hello and whatnot. After talking for a bit, she saw a picture on the mantel and said how lovely a picture of Anna that was and asked when it was taken because it seemed to be very old. As you can probably guess, the picture was not of Anna. It was, in fact, a picture of the teacher that used to teach the children in the house while it was the schoolhouse. They had brought the pictures and papers to the township's history office, or wherever they keep the old files. The name has slipped my mind at the moment, and had been informed that the picture of the woman was the school teacher, and the groundskeeper, whose name was Brian, had been in love with her when she died suddenly. Because of her death, Brian later ended self in the house. Because of the very striking resemblance between Anna and the school teacher, they assumed that the figure that she had seen was Brian. He had probably thought that his love was back, so he went to her. It kind of became a little joke within the family that Anna had a ghostly admirer, and now that there was some reasoning why he was there, she felt a little better about the whole situation, although she confessed that she never stopped feeling his presence around her. Years later, when Anna and my mom were both in their 40s, my mom visited her at her house, which was only about 2 blocks from her mother's and father's house. Creepily enough, the house's backyard was a very small graveyard. Things are always happening in that house. I've personally witnessed a few odd things, but getting back to the main story. My mom and Anna were catching up when my mom brought up Brian and jokingly asked her if she'd seen him lately or felt his presence when suddenly the blinds that were down covering the door shot up, scaring the shit out of my mom and startling Anna. Apparently they just started laughing, and Anna said, "Hello Brian. My dad saw the ghost of a little girl in our childhood home. Has anyone experienced something similar? I don't usually share things like this, but something has been sitting with me ever since my dad shared it. He told me he saw a little girl in a green dress skipping in front of him, inside our childhood home in Oregon. He said she was clear as day, skipping past him like she didn't even see him. The image has stuck with me since he told me, and I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it. What's strange is that this isn't the first thing that's happened in that house. My sister and I have both felt a presence over the years. We've heard footsteps when no one was home, voices in empty rooms, and things falling off counters when no one was near them. We would often find smiley faces in dust or off of steam in a mirror, like they were drawn with someone's finger. Along with a child's handprints on glass, mirrors, etc. We always brushed it off, but now, with my dad seeing that little girl, it's making me wonder if someone has always been there. I don't feel scared exactly. More like I need to understand. Like she's a part of the house in some way we never acknowledged. Has anyone ever seen or experienced something similar? A young girl ghost, especially in a green dress, skipping or playing? Smiley faces or children's drawings? Any stories, thoughts, or even theories would mean a lot. Thanks for listening. I was followed for decades by this blacker than black blob thing that would either hover over me when I was sleeping, or I would see it like a black mass standing beside the bed. Occasionally I'd wake up to a smothering sensation, and it would appear just inches away from my face. Once I woke to this thing standing by the bed. I was tired and, after so many years, totally fed up with being terrorized by it. It occurred to me that what it was doing was a form of assault, and that made me really angry, rather than frightened as I usually was. Filled with anger, instead of burying my head under the covers, I jumped up and went swinging at the thing with my fists. I swore at it and told it to stop harassing me. That it was no better than a bully, and I refused to be its victim any longer. I ranted at the black blob, following it until it moved to a corner of my bedroom, where it slowly dissolved. I haven't seen it since. Interacting with a ghost. Hi, many years ago, 1987, I had an encounter with a ghost or apparition, whatever you want to call it. My sister passed away accidentally in 1985, and for the record, the apparition had nothing to do with her at all. It happened in the middle of the day around 2 p.m. when I went into my sister's room to get a birthday card from her cupboard, which is where we kept them. I opened the door and retrieved a 17th birthday card for my friend, and upon closing the door, I encountered an elderly lady standing there. She was tiny, around 4.5 feet, and wearing rags, or very old dirty clothing, with a hood over her hair. She was carrying a small picnic basket filled with apples, which were covered by a checkered tea towel. She had missing teeth but was constantly smiling, which put me at ease, which is strange, as I was standing in my sister's bedroom looking at an apparition who appeared to be trying to communicate with me. The woman offered me an apple by extending her arm with the apple in her hand. I could not hear the words, but I could make out her lips saying, "Here, take one," as she offered me the apple. I reached out to grab the apple, but my hand went straight through the lady's hand, just like you see in the old ghost movies/cartoons. When this occurred, the lady looked confused, so I tried to grab the apple again, but my hand went through hers once more. At this point I began to panic, as I think the reality of what was going on had just hit my brain, and I started grabbing at the apple quickly. As my hand repetitively went through the lady's hand, she became upset and was saying no, no, again, no sound, waving her hands for me to stop, and then she disappeared. Here are some additional points to this story. The lady was three-dimensional but looked like she was in a noisy picture, like an old snowy TV image from the pre-digital days. I could see color and a great amount of detail but absolutely no sound at all. This happened in the middle of the day, and I was 17 at the time. I spent the next 10 years checking my sister's room every time I walked past. I regret actually panicking, as who knows how long the encounter would have gone on and what I may have learned from the interaction had I gotten any further. I tried to calculate how long the encounter went, and I estimated it went for around 30 to 40 seconds. I did not believe in ghosts prior to this, although I had seen various TV shows that depicted ghosts as white sheets with the eyes cut out as I grew up. I wanted to put it out there to see if anyone else has had a similar experience. Think what you want, but this is my personal experience. When I was about 15, my parents and I visited my hometown in Mexico. It was a small village of about 80 when we left and still only had about 300 when we returned. One night, I was leaving one aunt's house for another. The first aunt wasn't done with dessert and told me to wait at my other aunt's house. It's about a 2-minute walk, so I walked it alone. It must have been around 10 p.m. To get to my other aunt's house, you needed to walk through a beaten path of roses and backyards with fences. Also, I needed to pass through our old busted-up home from when we lived there when I was a baby. In the yard, I saw a woman dressed in white. Now, white isn't that uncommon where I'm from. And gender stereotypes are a huge thing there, so there's no reason to think a woman dressed in a white dress was weird. I saw people like that all the time walking during the day. She waved, and I waved back. I pass by, and I finally get to my aunt's house. We talk and eat. During this time, I ask my aunt who was in our front yard. My aunt and uncle look at each other very concerned. Apparently some people see a woman like that at night. Sometimes she screams at them, and sometimes she just disappears. I figured this was just them trying to scare me out. Until I asked my parents about this. They did the same thing. Apparently it had been going on for a while. It was weird. It never happened again, and I never saw anything like that there again. I'd what to think. All I know is that's what I think I saw, and that's what they told me. It wasn't particularly frightening, but it was an unusual experience I had. There was a boy in my room last night. I've practically told everyone I know, but I want to tell even more people, lol. So I'm a 17-year-old girl, and my family has lived in the same house since I was 4. It was built in 1907. I know everyone says their house is haunted, especially if it's old, but I and my whole family are literally 10,000% sure ours is. It's even turned my dad into a believer. If you knew him, you'd know what a big deal that is. This would be 10 pages long if I listed everything that's ever happened, but some significant events. Things move all the time. The stove has turned on by itself right in front of our eyes on multiple occasions, and there's a table in the entryway that never stays put. Doors open and close by themselves. Not a day goes by that we don't hear clear footsteps on the stairs. We've also heard the upstairs bathroom faucets turn on by themselves, but we've never actually seen that happen. While my bathroom was being remodeled, I took a shower in the only bathroom in the house without an exhaust fan. All the other bathrooms have had one added, and when I finished, I found a drawing of a shoe in the fog on the mirror. Weird noises are constantly coming from the basement. The list goes on and on. Almost everyone who's ever spent the night at our house, regardless of what they believed when they walked in, leaves believing in ghosts. Even during my teenage years, I experienced several friends departing unexpectedly in the middle of the night due to fear. Despite everything that has happened, my parents remain obsessed with our house and refuse to move. It's a historic house, and they've put significant effort into it. Plus, nothing's ever harmed us, so they assume it's safe. It sounds weird, but I've never been frightened. I don't know if it's because I'm so used to it or because our ghosts aren't malicious, but I'm just not. Anyway, I'd never actually seen a ghost until yesterday. Neither had anyone else in my family. It had all just been weird occurrences, not actual sightings. But here's what happened last night. Our house is 3 stories, and I live on the top floor with one of my brothers. He's also 17 if that matters. I'm a triplet. Our rooms are right across the hall from each other. I was sitting on my bed with my door open, and he was in his room with his door closed. It was around 11. All of a sudden, I heard footsteps on the stairs, so I looked up, not expecting anyone to be there because there never is. But then this boy just walked through my door, in the flesh, as real as you can get. I have 2 other brothers who live on the 2nd floor, 15, and then the other triplet, 17, so I automatically assumed the boy was one of my brother's friends who'd come over without me knowing and then wandered into my room. My last thought was a ghost. I got freaked out, but not for the reason you'd think. I was scared because I thought he was going to try to pull something weird. I didn't understand why he'd walk into his friend's sister's room so late at night. He didn't say anything, and I froze for a second, but then I finally asked him who he was and what he was doing. He didn't answer, he just kind of stood in the middle of the room, several feet away from my bed. My room is pretty big, and looked around all dazed and confused. That freaked me out even more, so I ran past him and into my brother's room. I told him there was a boy in my room who I assumed was either his or one of our other brother's friends, and he looked like he was on drugs or something. My brother freaked out, too, said he didn't have a friend over, and rushed into my room to confront him. Then he came back, like 2 minutes later, and told me he couldn't find anyone. We went back in my room together and checked literally everywhere, the closet, under the bed, etc., but there was no one. I do have a balcony in my room, but there's no way he could have left that way because not only would we have heard the balcony door open, it's really creaky, but it was double locked, and there would have been no time to open it. Plus, getting down from the 3rd-story balcony without hurting yourself is next to impossible. But we did check the balcony, just to be super safe. When we couldn't find anyone, we went to my other brothers and asked them if they had any friends over. They both said no, so we woke up our parents and told them what happened. My dad told me and my mom to go outside and wait while he and my brothers searched every single room of the house. They didn't find anyone or any unlocked doors. Everyone was so freaked out that we ended up calling the police, but they didn't find anything either. The police are convinced I was dreaming, but I know for a fact that I was awake. My family and I are all almost certain it was a ghost. So, yeah. I'll literally never get over this. Repeated ghost interaction at mom's dorm. Several years ago, I experienced a period of extreme hardship. I'd recently gotten divorced after 4.5 years of marriage to my childhood sweetheart, who had left me for her teacher. Then, Just as I believed I was finally receiving a genuine opportunity at love with a new partner, she abruptly and without warning dismissed me to begin a relationship with someone else. I was financially struggling and emotionally devastated from the divorce, which made this new breakup even more devastating and left me homeless. Thankfully, my mother had gone back to college to finish her degree and was living in the dorms. While it wasn't allowed, I was able to sleep there every night without incident, for the most part. I was so depressed I couldn't manage to do simple things like work. I was always in the darkest funk imaginable because I'd gone from functional husband to homeless divorce. My situation may have made me more open to the supernatural, or it may have attracted this spirit. I'd had numerous experiences around this time after my divorce, but what ended up happening in the dorm felt unique and, perhaps more importantly, was often witnessed by my mom. The first event we both witnessed was that our televisions kept turning on to dead static channels. The TVs were interesting because they never had static. When you turned them on, they went to a black screen, and no amount of fiddling would change that. The TV would turn on, and I'd turn it off. Sometimes it would immediately turn right back on. Often it would be repeated, and it made no sense to either one of us. It usually happened in the early evening, but it also happened in the middle of the night and afternoon a couple of times. Someone else's universal remote may have done this, as we tried to use remotes through the thick brick walls to no avail. The next thing that happened was a series of events. As I mentioned, I wasn't working at the time, and because of my depression, I'd sleep in my mom's room while she was at work. One day my girlfriend was taking a nap with me, and I felt someone yank on my ankle hard enough that the bed moved and woke her up. Another day, before I entered into a relationship, a close female friend was resting with me and also experienced her ankle being pulled. It seemed that another woman was there, which was the common denominator. This, however, is the big one. I was sleeping by myself one afternoon, waiting for my mother to return, and I heard the door open and close very lightly, like I just heard the door handle turning but didn't hear the door open and shut really. I figured my mom was just trying not to wake me up. The thing was, I wasn't actually asleep, I was just trying to sleep, but when my sleep mask was lifted up off my eyes, I kept them closed in hopes of seeming like I was asleep so that I'd be left alone. There was mild shuffling around, the sound of someone sitting down in a chair, and paper moving, and then it became silent. I suddenly felt a hard tap 3 times above my knee, like my mom might do to wake me up, and when I took off the sleep mask, there was no one there. About a minute later my mom walked in, and I asked her if she had been in the room, but I didn't even need to ask because she had all of her work stuff in her arm still. A week or so later she had the same triple knee tap happen, and she asked me if that was the same thing that happened to me. At this point it had happened to 3 different people, which seems pretty substantial to me. It ended the same way it began. I was alone, and the TV kept turning on a dead channel repeatedly, back to back. As soon as I turn the TV off and turn my back, it will turn right back on. After 5 separate times, a little frustrated, I said, "Look, I don't know what it is that you're trying to get at, so you might as well stop doing that. Whatever it is that you're trying to say, I'm not getting it." That was the last time anything happened. I'm sure that the spirit sought me out because I had just had major spiritual interaction elsewhere, and it could smell it on me. I also was in an emotional place, and I feel like that energy may have helped it manifest some. I truly don't think it was malevolent, I think it was just desperately trying to say something. The dorm had been a medical facility, I think used by nuns at one point, which could have created a lot of energy one way or the other. I think I messed up and summoned a paranormal being. So last week I was on a video call with my girlfriend. We were talking about ghosts, and I stupidly said out loud, "I'm not scared of ghosts. Come on, ghosts, come get me. I'll duck you up." For a little background, I live with my mom and sister, and I've never experienced anything paranormal in this house. Here are the events that followed. Saturday night, about 2 to 3 days after I said what I did, my sister and her friend run downstairs because they heard my mom scream Daniel. In what they call a terrifying scream. I did not know about this until later on. Early Monday morning, I wake up, and the screws that hold the lock on my bedroom door are loose. Someone must have tried to force my door open for this to happen, and it must have happened while I was sleeping. My family members say they didn't even try to open my door. Paranormal isn't even on my mind yet. Monday evening, my sister and her boyfriend are in their room, and I hear my sister faintly calling my name from her room. She called my name twice, and then there was silence. I shouted back, and nothing. I thought nothing of it until a few hours later. My mom asked why my sister was calling my name, as she had already asked her, and my sister denied calling my name. And here we are now. This connects everything to something awful, and I'm extremely freaked out. How am I meant to sleep tonight? Is this an evil being? My closest friend from high school relocated to a very old house with several friends. While she sewed, the lights would frequently flicker and turn off, along with her sewing machine. I am sensitive to spirits and can usually sense their presence, so I do my best to avoid acknowledging them. When I feel scared, I recite a protection mantra. I was 18 at the time and not as used to dealing with spirits/protecting myself as I am now. One night we were partying, and I came down from the washroom on the top floor. As I was coming down the dark old staircase, I felt the spirit, and I actually experienced it trying to enter my body. I rushed down the stairs into the kitchen, felt very off, and looked down at my hands. I could see the shadowy extension of longer fingers. Freaked the duck out, looked in a mirror, and screamed, "Get out of my body. This is my body, and you are not allowed near me. Leave me alone." After that, I still felt his presence, but he kept his distance. He mostly stayed in the basement, and I never went there. I felt him close a few times but would ignore him. That was the biggest lesson, that I have to protect myself from certain entities. The house has since been torn down. I think it was one of the original owners that didn't like people in his house and would do all he could to mess with them. Has anyone ever witnessed a shadow person and a living person interacting or working together? This is a true experience, and I would really like to know if anyone has ever seen or experienced anything like this. From 2004 to 2007, my best friend Katie and I worked at a small, family-owned seafood restaurant in Winchester Bay, Oregon. In 2006 we were invited by the cook and a small group of regulars to come to a bonfire on the bay to watch the fireworks with them on the 4th of July. Thinking it sounded intriguing and having no other plans, we agreed to come. Upon arrival, we find the boys drinking next to a huge fire in a large clearing-type strip of grass. There are a ton of regulations about burning in Oregon because of the risk of wildfires that can burn out of control very quickly, so this huge grassy area was perfect, especially since they had created a secure fire pit before lighting anything. This grassy stretch was surrounded on three sides with dense thickets of evergreens. There was one wide, clearly defined trail that led through the trees to the water's edge and a gravel parking area behind us. Being 20 years old, we weren't opposed to drinking, but we didn't know these men that well. We decided to stay sober and just enjoy the fire and the upcoming show in the sky, just in case they started acting inappropriately. After chatting for a bit, the guys decide they want to partake in an herbal smoking session. Katie and I say no thanks, and the boys head off into the trees to puff the chiba. Katie and I are standing alone by the fire, just vibing and enjoying the evening. Suddenly I get this strange sensation, and my eyes keep wandering to a specific area of the tree line. It's a crawling sensation that I'm trying to ignore, but I can't help myself, I just keep glancing over. After a minute or two, an older woman comes walking out of the trees. She was not on or near the trail. This tiny woman had walked through an area of thick undergrowth in the pitch black. She was short and looked frail, although it was hard to tell as she was dressed in layers of raggedy long skirts or dresses and had several shawls or blankets wrapped around her shoulders like a human rag bag. She was hunched over and walking slowly, as if she were older and her joints were bothering her. She was a little over 100 yards away, and it was twilight, so I couldn't make out her face or features. Just her outfit, which, not gonna lie, was pretty creepy. Figuring she was a homeless person who deserved some respect and sympathy, I tried not to stare. However, when I looked over at Katie, she was watching this woman too. The woman had a force or vibe about her that made it hard not to watch her. She gave off the feeling of a wild animal in your house, when you know it's probably not too dangerous but you have to keep your eyes on it just in case it becomes aggressive before you can get it out, if that makes sense. I felt a persistent sense of unease that I kept trying to shake off. Katie turns to me and asks if I'm seeing this. I reply, yes, she's probably just a homeless person, poor lady. Katie responds by telling me that the woman is giving her a weird feeling, and it makes her skin crawl to the point that she feels she shouldn't look away. This validation of my misgivings is not comforting. Katie and I stand in silence, watching the woman as she slowly totters along the tree line to our left. I am still feeling awful for staring and am going through all the reasons in my head that I'm an idiot for worrying about a decrepit grandmother, even if she does look like a stereotypical witch. Suddenly the woman comes to a complete stop. Until this moment she had been looking at the ground. She now stops, raises her head, and looks directly at us. A feeling of dread immediately hits me in the gut. My stomach drops, her look feels malevolent even though I still can't make out facial features in the dusk. Then, no shit, this woman raises her left arm and points straight at us while letting out the most blood-curdling screech I've ever heard in my life. I think my heart stopped beating for a second. Then, and I will have this image in my head until the day I die, right in front of her pointing finger, a silhouette of a human made of what looked like black mist coalesced, a shadow person, the first one I'd ever seen. I don't know if it just appeared or if it actually came from her body. I barely had time to register what I was seeing before the thing flew towards us. It moved so incredibly fast that it blurred and covered about 300 feet in less than 3 seconds. This thing passed directly between me and Katie, on my left and her right. It literally blew my hair back over my shoulder on that side when it rushed past us. We spent several seconds in complete shock, staring at each other with bloodless pale faces. Simultaneously, we both turned to look at the woman. She was no longer looking at us or acknowledging us in any way but had picked up her pace and was doing a hobbling run in the direction she had originally been headed, eyes on the ground. Katie and I stood in silence, each afraid we might have just gone insane. At first I was afraid to even ask her if she'd seen that thing, but looking at her face I knew she had seen something. She finally asked if I had seen what she just did, because she wasn't sure if it was real. We compared notes and realized that we had both witnessed the same thing. When I started freaking out about the fact that this thing had been real enough to blow my hair back, she admitted that while she did not experience her hair moving, she had seen my hair blow back as she turned her head to watch it move between us. I have no idea who that woman was or what she sent after us. It looked like a shadow person, but who knows what they even are. And never in my life have I ever heard of a shadow person doing a living person's bidding, and I have looked into it after this experience. I have never seen her again, and I surely never want to. This experience has bothered me for years, and so I bring it to the internet to find out if anyone else has ever witnessed a shadow person and a living person working together. I also hope to gather some theories about what actually happened that night. I think we saw the shadow thing once more a couple nights later, but it didn't have a human shape that time, so I'm not sure if it was the same entity, but the timing seemed too coincidental. Thanks for listening. I am excited, and also feeling a little nervous, to hear some theories on this experience. Can anyone shed light on this experience I had? This happened about 5 years ago. I am currently 25 years old. I've always had strange occurrences happen to me and members of my family throughout my life, less so now. We've lived at multiple homes, so I usually assumed we had something to do with what was happening more than the actual locations. Now to the actual event. I was staying home alone for that weekend. My family was going out, and I couldn't go since I had to work. We are a big family, so the weekend would actually be the first time in years that I have the house to myself for 2 full nights and days. I usually babysat my younger siblings. Another thing to add is that I've always had a strange relationship with sleep and dreams, as I'm a heavy dreamer but not a heavy sleeper. A lot of my encounters have been prior to or during sleep. So I woke up in the middle of the night, which is very common for me, and once I'm awake, I'm up for a good bit. I'm awake and just chilling on my bed. My phone is broken, so I can't check the time, and all my lights are off. I'm there contemplating sleep or TV when a light comes on from within the gap of my bed and wall. A pale blue light appeared to be emanating from under the bed, specifically on the side adjacent to the wall. There was no noise, and I was just surprised. I thought maybe an electrical socket was going off. I was going to peer down when a small orb, probably the size of a golf ball, started rising up from the shining light. It just rises up a bit, maybe a couple of feet away from my face. I haven't moved or interacted at all. And then it just comes back down the gap, and the light goes off. I eventually do peer over and see nothing. There was no light or any markings. Not a noise, and the rest of the weekend went by fine. I am nearly certain that I was awake, and I am open to the possibility that this experience has a natural explanation. Furthermore, although I've had many encounters before, this is the only one of this nature that I've experienced. Most of my encounters have been auditory or sensory. Thank you for taking the time to listen to it. Went ghost hunting today with my best friend. So first of all, I didn't believe anything would happen, and nor did we go with the intention of ghost hunting. We simply wanted to do witchy stuff for the shits and giggles, and we had everything planned out: crystals, incense, herbs, spices, and seashells. Salt and whatnot. It was a silly idea at the beginning, but honestly I'm a little shocked. We started with cleansing the space with salt and creating a salt circle around us. Our blanket already had an altar made of crystals and seashells to preserve good energy. My friend, let's call her Sage, wanted answers on her boyfriend, and we'd done divination prior to arriving at the spot in a cafe. The cards, which weren't professional or anything but made by ourselves, genuinely gave us some trusted answers that we took seriously, though it was still a joke in our heads, at least mine. After setting up our space by cleansing with salt, we began to enchant protective spells and bond our energy together. It helped calm us both down and increase the anticipation to ask more about her boyfriend and whether he was good for Sage. I asked her what she wanted to start with, and she didn't really have questions about him at the moment, so we thought of something else. This is where the spooky shit began. I suggested we contact spirits, the ones of the forest, and as it was already in the plan, we began to do so. We shuffled our divination deck and set it in the center of the crystal altar. We even lit incense to cleanse the space. From the beginning we set good intentions and made it clear that no negative energies were welcome near us and that we were safe within our circle of salt, even after we left. I personally still didn't believe anything would happen, and for a while nothing did. The cards did give us answers to our questions: are there spirits here? Etc. The cards landed on yes, and though I believed it, in the back of my mind this was still a joke. It was then that the energy around us shifted. I felt as though something was looming around us. Something dark and ominous. I shifted and began to speak, asking Sage if she felt it too. She agreed. I was just about to say I can feel and see something behind her when she beat me to it. She felt as though the thing was behind her. I was shocked and thought it could have been a coincidence. I think not. Why? Because we had almost the exact same description of the thing, a man who was extremely tall and made of black fog with an eerily stretchy body. That was odd. We then asked the cards, and the spirits, if there was something like that here. Yes was the answer. We laughed nervously, still not believing. We chose a card again, asking if that thing was behind Sage. Yes. Now things got a little scary. The wind was picking up, and we felt whatever it was coming closer. We then flipped the cards again, asking whether this spirit was a spirit or entity with bad intentions. It said absolutely or yes. Then we flipped again, asking if this was exactly a spirit, and it said, your perception is distorting the lens. I then asked if this thing was a demon or demonic, and the cards said yes. Now we were scared. We then took salt and tried repelling the spirit by cleansing the area carefully, not stepping out of our circle. I felt as though this spirit was masculine and a man, and then we asked, and it said absolutely since we wanted to know whether it was feminine or masculine. Sage then pointed out our conversation from earlier in which we discussed women's rights and the negative effects of the adult industry. She then pointed out that this spirit could have been following us since then and gained power here. That made sense. We then asked if it was bound to the forest or if it was its home. The card said that we were asking the wrong question. We then realized that it was not bound to this location and must have followed us here. Inference. We then asked it if it wanted to harm us, and the card said absolutely or flip again and then absolutely. There were a few maybes in the mix, but the influx of yes in terms of its bad intentions was too much to ignore. Sage then pointed out how she felt as though it was coming closer before I could say the exact same thing, and in my mind I could feel and visualize it extending its arms towards her to latch on. She then said the exact same thing. It was ducking scary. We then spent time asking other questions to other spirits, trying to not communicate with the evil man. However, the other spirits were not welcoming either and mostly remained neutral. The energy shifted again, and it felt ominous, and suddenly all the spirits began to speak with harmful intent through the cards, and we realized that it felt as though something, the man, was spinning around our salt circle and trying to cover it in a circle of black fog. We used rosemary, salt, and dried chilies to banish it or at least repel it. And then, suddenly, in the leaves surrounding us, right behind Sage, something dropped, and the leaves flew everywhere. It wasn't a rock, a pebble, or any animal. The leaves shifted on their own. It eerily felt like the heavy footstep of someone, the man. Suddenly I felt something was watching me from the bushes too, and my blood ran cold. The answers from the cards also began to be ominous once more. The wind picked up after a while of protection spells, and it felt as though Mother Nature or the forest was trying to protect us. However, we were unprepared for what happened next. We then focused on more personal questions to break from the spirits and the malevolent ones. It wasn't until later that we decided to do more spirit work when the forest started telling us to leave. We should have taken that warning. The outcome wasn't drastic though. First the spirits told us we weren't welcome, then the forest gave us mixed signals with maybe and it's possible. The forest only told us to leave after we received the final question, which was answered with yes. Unfortunately we were stupid, and while packing up, we stayed a little longer. Why? For a dumb reason. The purpose of our visit was to take pictures. And afterwards we realized we'd taken too much from the forest, so we distributed moonwater as an offering. After that we took even more pictures rather than leaving. Suddenly the weather got horrible, the forecast said nothing about rain. And though it could have been a coincidence, the thunder rumbling like it was telling us to get out felt ominous. The skies got darker too, and we honestly ran while giggling since it felt too coincidental to be real. Well, bad ducking idea. Why? The moment we left the forest, it began pouring, so much so that our shoes, socks, and tour clothes up to our knees were wet. Our hair was out of place, and we couldn't find our way back easily. It felt as though Mother Nature was mad at us, Or the forest. That was what Sage said, at the very least. My views were slightly different on it. I believed that the rain was a form of purification and cleaning us. It felt like a gift to me, before the rain got even harder. Why did I feel that way? Because before leaving the forest I warned Sage that we must shower when getting home to wash the filth and negativity off us, if it by chance clung to us somehow. Overall, my beliefs on spirits and the supernatural have changed significantly. I was always a believer, but when doing this for myself, I thought nothing would happen. But some things that happened today were too intense to be just a coincidence. If anyone has any clue what we experience or any comments, please do. If anyone has advice or any other way to further communicate, feel free to leave a comment on that, too. Though I am a bit shook, I do want to delve deeper. Nevertheless, I can't not admit that I am a bit scared. Something pretending to be a husband. Okay, so I'm new here, so I'm not sure if this is going to look correct, but I need to talk this out. No one in my family likes to discuss this. They say it feels too negative and like something bad will happen, but basically I was home alone with my daughter. My husband works the night shift, and it was maybe 1 a.m., so he was at work. My daughter was asleep in bed next to me, and I decided to turn my phone off and go to bed. As I started to settle, I heard my dog jump up. It sounded like she was getting attention from someone, so I opened my eyes and saw my husband bent over petting her. Now, my husband works in a warehouse and wears a very bright reflective vest. At first my heart dropped because I knew no one should be here, then I saw his vest, and I knew it was him. The only issue was that something felt off, and I was certain he shouldn't be there. I stared at him, and he looked up and smiled at me. I'm not sure when I fully realized it, but I knew this was not my husband, so I shut my eyes tight and refused to open them. I felt hands moving up my legs, and once they reached my thighs, the hands were gone, and my daughter woke up screaming bloody murder. My mom instinct came in, and helping my daughter was more important than hiding from whatever this was, so I jumped up and grabbed my phone as fast as I could. I shined the light and tried to console my daughter. She repeatedly screamed and then added, "This has never happened before or after." I found this group and wanted to share my story, but I don't know what that thing was or wanted. I would like to mention that I have been asked whether this could be sleep paralysis. I personally don't believe it was sleep paralysis, but the timing is questionable. Therefore, if it does fall under that category, I apologize. Physical interaction. I'm usually a skeptical person, but I've had experiences that I can't explain. One of them happened last summer when I was visiting family in the UK. They were renovating their house, which is about 350 years old, and almost every part of the house had been demolished and transformed into a modern home except for the entryway, which remained the only part of the original. The entryway is connected to the kitchen and has one of those doors that has two parts, where it's basically in half and you can open the top and bottom. I was stirring my coffee in the kitchen. Everyone had left the house for personal errands. And while stirring, I suddenly got this inexplicable feeling where you feel like you're being watched. I could almost hear what it sounded like, walking on gravel from outside the entryway. It had a very distinct sound, as if you were hearing it through a seashell, far away and close at the same time. Things then got suddenly quiet, even the birds seemed to stop chirping. In my peripheral vision I thought I could make out a figure of sorts. I couldn't see it, but I felt something was there. I pictured someone leaning on the inside of the entryway door, which was then accompanied by the actual sound of the entryway creaking. I thought maybe one of my cousins was home, and I was expecting them to walk in at any second, but they didn't. It was almost like I zoned out. I'm not sure how to explain it, but after zoning out in the silence for about 4 seconds, I heard a very loud and sudden bang. I looked over towards the source of the noise, and the top part of the entryway doors was shaking and swinging outward. I approached the doors and peeked outside, but there was nobody there. I looked around for something that could have maybe fallen and hit it. Nothing. Nobody was home, no cars were in the driveway, and no large animals were around either. The birds then began chirping again. Their house isn't on a public road, it's in the countryside. What's weird is that both parts of the door were shut, and although it opened both ways, you'd have had to hit it from the inside for it to have swung outward like it did. Thinking back to it feels very personal, very close. I'm not sure why. I still can't explain what I experienced, and I haven't had a similar experience since. Real ghost interaction I had a few years back. So this was the summer of my freshman year in high school, and it was, I would say, past 8 p.m. before 9 o'clock. I'm in my room playing Minecraft with my headset on, talking to a buddy across the country. It is just my mom and dad at home. Dad is asleep, mom is in the living room on the complete opposite wall from me. My brother would usually come in and flick my head when I was playing video games, and I wouldn't turn around because I knew it was him. This time was different. I felt a light touch on my left shoulder, almost a fingertip touch. I say, Kylar, stop, get out, as I'm 100% invested in my Hunger Games game, and nothing else happens for about 45 seconds. I continue playing as if he had walked away, and it feels as if a hand has now fully been laid on my shoulder for a split second. I quickly turn around to see nothing and nobody in sight. My heart drops. I turn back around to my computer screen, and the loudest bang on my computer desk happens and shakes the whole desk and everything that's on it, and my headset goes flying off onto the ground as I jump back. Immediately I run to the living room, 10 steps away, and you can hear everything in this house, to find my mother watching TV as if nothing happened. I notice that and say, please tell me you heard that. And heard what? She says. No, I say as I run back to the room and pick up the mic and ask my buddy if he heard anything. He heard it all and said, what the duck was that? It was like a big crash, and I was clueless and speechless as to what happened. I have had a couple of super weird demon-like dreams in that bed after that but moved out the next year. Does anyone have any idea what is in that house? I was on a road trip last year and was driving through Virginia or Tennessee at about 3 a.m. It was raining. I was the only car on that stretch of highway for a while, and then 2 cars passed me going too fast. They both took the next exit. Then maybe a minute later, 2 identical cars shot past me going way too fast. Remember, it's raining. At the time I assumed that they took the wrong exit or were racing. They slowed to a speed similar to my pace up ahead, so I was using their tail lights to stay in my lane. The rain and darkness were making it difficult to see the lines. Now for the wall. It appeared ahead of the 2 cars in front of me. I couldn't see the wall, but I could see the rain reacting with the wall. I wasn't sure what I was seeing or if my sleep-deprived brain was tricking me. I was going 65 miles per hour, and the wall appeared to be approaching my vehicle much more slowly than if it were stationary. When the first car passed through the wall, it looked like they turned off their lights. Then the second car passed through the wall, and it looked like they also turned off their lights. 1 second I could see them, and then the next second I couldn't. They may have disappeared, but in fairness I was very distracted by this approaching wall. I slowed way down, and as I drove into the wall, I was already too close to avoid it or stop completely. The wall breached my windshield slowly, and I reached out with my right hand to touch it. It wasn't visible, but the light was shimmering off of it. As soon as my middle finger touched the surface, the wall disappeared, and a hot, numbing sensation ran up to my elbow and cooled down, retreating back to my hand. I was freaked out. I pulled off at the next exit to calm down. I was able to get to the place I was going to sleep without any further strangeness. I don't know what I saw. I may have been hallucinating because it was a long road trip. That said, the tip of my middle finger remained numb for the next 3 months, the only part of my body that touched the wall. It has since recovered. I'm starting to fear my house. My house is old, around 90 to 100 years old, the oldest remaining building in my rural area besides the general store, which is not operational. I couldn't give you a complete background for this house and its owner/history, as I don't know it. What I can tell you is that this was my grandparents' home before it was passed to me, and both of my grandparents died here. Mama passed in the guest bedroom, her bedroom at the time, and Pawpaw passed in the living room. The hospice bed would only fit in this room. I know that makes for strange circumstances, but they were both natural deaths. One from cancer and the other from pneumonia, so no malice or foul play as far as they are concerned, but not peaceful either. I am honestly starting to think this house is haunted or at least has something supernatural happening. I do not have the means to capture video or quality pictures, but I can at least tell you what I've seen/experienced, and maybe you can give advice. First, I started noticing this mist outside of one of the living room windows. The mist always appears at the same window, but its occurrence is inconsistent. I cannot plan a recording because it does not happen at specific times or on certain days, although I have observed it 3 to 4 times now. At first I tried to explain this away as the neighbor's washing machine, ours does this, but their wash is on the wrong side of the house. There's no way the mist could carry that far, and there's a 6-foot fence between their house and the area where this mist appears. It can't be our wash, because again, it's on the wrong side of the house and too far away. So I thought maybe it could be smoke from the neighbor's wood stove drifting since the smoke funnel is close enough, but when I checked, there was no smoke coming out. The way the mist moves is odd too. It's low to the ground, only about 4 feet high total, so very easy to miss. But it doesn't move like a wash mist or smoke. It almost looks like a cloud being pulled on a string. It moves as one mass, very quickly. Second, I have 2 doors that go into my bathroom. One in the walk-in closet of my bedroom and one that leads in from the washroom/mudroom/entryway, right next to the front door on the adjacent wall. I can open one of the doors, and the other will open. It doesn't matter which, the opposite one will open. I could easily explain this away with loose latches/wallet out latch holes, but the thing is, I can close the doors, not locked, just pulled close, and I cannot push them open once closed. There's no handle turning, no rustling noises, just opening silently. If I lock them, they don't open, but I can sometimes hear a thump on each of the doors. Almost like someone trying to open a door, realizing it's locked, and then trying the other. Third, I can hear footsteps, and so can my husband. I can hear them in the bedroom and the attic. Usually and most commonly I will hear them in the attic. I can be sitting in the living room and hear what sounds like footsteps just above me, right about where my chandelier sits. It feels like I'm being watched and is super creepy. One day my husband and I both heard what sounded like 3 to 4 heavy footsteps, like how a workbook sounds, just above us. It was crystal clear and scary enough that we thought someone broke in. The house layout makes this possible, as it has happened before. The ladder to the attic is in an unlocked screened-in porch adjoined to the house, as is the pull-down door for the attic ladder. However, the door between the house and porch does. He went up there with a gun and flashlight in hand, and there was nothing, not even a stray squirrel or bird. Occasionally I can hear them follow me around up there. If I leave the living room and go to the bedroom to grab something/change/ etc. I can hear the thumps above me in the room I walked into. Only a couple of times have I heard them in the room with me. I hear footsteps just a few feet away from me, specifically in the bedroom where my grandpa used to sleep. My grandparents slept in separate rooms. The room that belonged to him is now where my husband and I sleep. I've never heard them on the ground floor anywhere else. Fourth and last, there are unexplainable noises. These vary vastly and are inconsistent. Twice we have heard what sounded like 3 knocks, like how you would knock on a door, on the window of our room or possibly the window of our walk-in closet. The windows are not far apart, and in the dark when trying to sleep, it can be difficult to accurately place a sound's location. Lol. Again crystal clear and scary enough that my husband turned on his table lamp, threw on some shorts, and grabbed the gun and a flashlight. All of this in, say, a minute max due to how everything is set up and where everything is, but probably less than that since he was pissed thinking someone was outside. He went out ready to confront someone, but there was no one anywhere to be seen, and there really are no places to hide. We have a chain link fence, and while it would be possible to climb over it and scuttle out of sight, it would be quite noisy and difficult in the dark. A flashlight could be seen easily, so I'd rule that out. We usually leave our gate open so someone could easily just walk out of the yard, but he would have seen them going down the road at least, and there was nothing. This one especially scares me. I can't completely rule out that this is some horrible prank, but I don't find that to be the most plausible answer either. We sometimes hear what sounds like items falling in other rooms. A couple of times I've heard what sounds like some of my dishes falling to the floor in the kitchen only to go in there and find that nothing has been moved or broken. Occasionally it'll sound like some of my items in the spare bedroom/game room, what used to be my grandmother's bedroom, have slid off their shelves. Or it'll sound like the TV in there has come on. It makes a start-up noise similar to an old Windows boot-up noise, only to find that it's still off. Many little things like that happen almost daily. The last weird noise is one that hasn't happened in a while. My husband operates a vintage 1994 Toyota long bed truck that previously belonged to my grandfather. My father gifted it to him, as I have a deep affection for that truck and hold many cherished memories with my grandfather associated with it. The passenger side door handle is broken on the outside, so he has to open the door from the inside for me to get in. Well, if you grab the handle on the outside, it makes a very distinct rattle noise. One night as we were starting to drift off to sleep, we heard that distinct sound. We thought someone was trying to break into the truck. They wouldn't have found much, but that's not the point. My husband didn't own a gun at that point, so he grabbed a knife from the dresser top. It's still dark in the house at this point. He isn't turning on the lights in the hopes that whoever it is won't run off. He quietly creeps through the closet, opens the door to the bathroom, opens the last door between the bathroom and entry, and peeks outside. He can't see anything, so he turns on the outside light. There's nothing there. No one around. Someone could have easily opened the other door and likely would have tried to get into the truck. There were no footprints, no sign of entry into the truck, nothing missing, and the handle was in its correct spot. By this I mean, remember it's broken? If you lift up on it sometimes, it can get stuck in an open position. It was just really strange. We know what we heard. It's a very distinct sound, and I've never heard anything that comes close to it. Do you think I could be dealing with something supernatural? While I am not a strong believer in lingering human spirits, I find it difficult to rationally explain some of these phenomena. I am open to any advice, opinions, input, etc. Just because I am not a firm believer does not mean I won't take you seriously or consider all tracks of thought. I think we have a mimic attached to us. My husband and I have had odd experiences for the last 5 years, and I am growing increasingly more concerned because things have gotten far more frequent in the past week. The most recent incident involving our dog, Cinnamon, occurred while I was at work tonight, which makes me fear for my baby's safety. It all started when I moved into my husband's condo. It was situated within an old schoolhouse, and the entire building genuinely unsettled me. It had a basement that I was terrified of stepping foot in after I saw a dark shadow figure out of the corner of my eye while washing our blankets in the communal laundry room. One night I was FaceTiming my mother on the bed. I heard Cinnamon's collar jingle and her familiar pitter-patter of paws on old hardwood. I saw her tail sticking up over the edge of the bed and making its way over to her usual spot, where she would jump up onto the bed. I told my mom that our dog was coming to say hi to her and patted the bed next to me to get her to jump up. I turned my cell phone to show her to my mom, and to my surprise, I didn't see her on my screen. "That's weird, where did she go?" I said, sitting up to see her fast asleep in her bed on the other side of the room. My mom literally watched my face go pale, and I started stuttering as I realized there was no way Cinnamon was ever right next to me. My mom says, "Well, that's freaky," and I yell my dog's name until she wakes up and joins me on the bed. Mom and I continued talking, then suddenly my dog looked down the hall toward our living room and barked as if someone was at the door. I followed her and turned on all the lights as I did. She then turned back around and barked at the bedroom. I decided sleep wasn't happening in our room, so I set up a sleeping situation in our living room. There was a small guest room attached to our living room, which was still pitch black. As I sat on the couch, I watched that room seem to become darker, and my dog ran to that side of the room, growling in a feral way I had never heard her do before. The hair on her back was sticking straight up. She sat on top of my legs and stared at this door as if she was keeping guard the rest of the night. Then, fast forward to about 2 years ago. We had since moved into our first home and had no paranormal activity. My husband went away again on a trip for work. I am upstairs in our bedroom, which is the entirety of our second floor. I'm watching TV and lying in bed when I once again hear the sound of my dog coming to join me. I see her tail. I sit up to say hello to her. Nothing is there. I then shout her name, and she comes running up the stairs. She wasn't even on the same floor of the house. She jumped into bed. About an hour later, she once again sat up and started growling, then jumped to this year. We have once again moved houses to an entirely different state. We had been living in my in-laws' home while we searched for a home. We had no experiences until this April when we bought our current home. I worked nights at a hospital, and I was about to go to bed when I heard our front door open and slam shut downstairs. I sat up in bed, and my dog started barking and ran into the hallway. I was 7 months pregnant and very tired, so I texted my husband to ask why he came home. He texted me back. He stated he wasn't home. Our dog came running back into our bedroom with her tail between her legs. I panicked and jumped up to lock the door to the bedroom as I called my husband. I told him I heard the front door open. He said it couldn't be possible because the door was locked and he currently had the only key. I told him the dog got freaked out and that I locked the door to our bedroom and asked if he thought I should call the cops. He told me I was probably hearing things, but I agreed to keep the door locked and then call me on his way home so I could unlock it. A few weeks later, my parents arrived in town to assist us in unpacking our newly delivered pods. He had to wait for our guest bed to arrive, so they stayed at a hotel. One morning before they arrived, I was in the living room and heard a loud crash and the sound of our dog whimpering and running away. I ran toward the sound and came across my dog with her tail between her legs. Worried she had knocked over a stack of boxes in the dining room containing glass, I ran there to check, and nothing had been disturbed. I ran to the living room to check on Cinnamon, and she was okay. I asked my husband if he heard the sound after he asked me what I was doing, and he said he hadn't heard anything. Later that day, my mom and I were unpacking the kitchen when all of a sudden the same sound occurred in the direction of our dining room. A crash, a whimper, and our dog came running. My mom ran into the dining room, but again everything was normal. We looked all around the first floor, but nothing. We assumed my husband and dad had gotten home from their trip to the hardware store unannounced and were working in the basement, so my mom shouted down the stairs to see if they were okay. No response, so she called my dad. She nervously laughed and said, "No, that can't be," when he told her they were still out at the hardware store. In the month leading up to giving birth, I started to hear the sound of someone running back and forth in the upstairs hallway. I assumed it was my husband and didn't really think much of it until after I gave birth and came home. I was freshly postpartum and heard the sound of footsteps running around. I freaked out thinking something was happening to my son, but when I hurried out of the shower, no one had been upstairs the whole time. Then about 2 weeks later, I was showering when I heard the bathroom door open and my husband say, "What you doing?" And I said, "Showering." "Close the door," loudly. No one answered, but my husband annoyedly shouted back, "Yeah, I know the door is closed." His answer was confusing, so I hopped out and walked over to the door to ask him if he had opened it to talk to me, and he said that he hadn't. That night I texted my dad, who was still at our house, and told him what was going on. I asked him if he could stand outside the bedroom door to see if I hear something the next time I shower. He did, and that was the first time I did not hear any sounds in the shower. Over the past month or so, activity has severely ramped up. It started with the cabinet door slamming shut while I was doing the dishes. Then, 2 days ago, my husband shouted up the stairs, "Where did you go?" I had been in our bedroom since he had gone downstairs, so I said, "Still in bed?" He immediately called me and asked if I was downstairs at all. I repeated that I was not. "So you didn't just say hello to me from the dining room?" He not only heard me say hello but also heard footsteps going into the dining room. Then tonight, while I was here at work, I got another call from my husband. He sounded scared and confused, and he told me that Cinnamon jumped out of bed out of nowhere and ran downstairs. Then he heard a yelp from downstairs, and she ran back up to our bedroom and jumped in bed, shaking. He had no idea what it could have been and was terrified. While on the phone with me, he ran downstairs to check to see if an animal had gotten into the house or something, but he found nothing to explain what she did. He is officially distressed about what is happening in our home. I am scared as a mother that whatever is going on is going to affect my son. Does anyone know if this is a mimic? How do you get rid of something like that? True interactions. In December of 2020, a being told me of specific events that would unfold, which have thus far. This being woke me, saying, "Watch me turn on the light." I opened my eyes and saw a semi-transparent limb stretch up to my ceiling fan and pull the cord, turning on my light. While I was lying in bed, this being told me what would soon occur, saying, "Try to survive." These experiences are not the first I have had communicating with spirits. The first dream I had in which a spirit interacted with me was as a child dreaming of my deceased brother. Before he visited me in a field, smiling and breathing his soul into my mouth, I had no idea he ever existed. He told me in my dream of his death and to ask my mother about it. His words echoed in my head as I woke up. I walked into her living room and asked her about him, whom she had never mentioned to me before. She turned white and asked how I knew. Demonic entity attachment, unlike any story you've listened to. This is a long story about an entity I have had attached to me for roughly 2.5 to 3 years now. And honestly, I'm so heightened to experiences that I was never really terrified or wanting to cleanse the energy away due to the fact that I have very different and abstract spiritual beliefs only because of my personal experiences. I seriously believe that whatever this entity is was never human or a part of our realm. I will go more in depth later in the story, but this creature almost mocks the Christian ideologies of angels and demons. This entity is neither negative nor positive, and I believe it does not have a gender, although I feel a more masculine presence than a feminine one. So let's begin. The first experience I had with this creature made me rethink how the entity became attached to me. Initially, I thought the increased presence was due to my use of a Ouija board, but later I realized that wasn't the case. I later remembered I did a guided third eye meditation, which is no longer online, and I'm glad it's gone because I'd be very worried if this happened to someone less capable with energies. The meditation I did about 4.5 years ago was very strange. I remember lying down in my bed and listening to the voice on the video. It instructed participants to breathe in a peculiar manner, almost as if shaking, while listening to audio tracks that I had never encountered in any other guided or non-guided meditation, despite my extensive experience with them. During the meditation, I felt and imagined a large black hand with long nails on the left side of my chest. It felt as if I was sitting up in my bed, and I could feel the hand push me gently back down to the bed. I didn't want to break the meditative state, and even though my heart began to race, I continued to keep my eyes closed, and I followed until the end of the meditation when I could hear the voice giving cues to wake up again. After sitting up, all I could see was a strange purple aura around everything I looked at. This comes into play later. After that meditation, I never really noticed the energy or hand again until, a few years later, I used the Ouija board. A few days after using the board, I started to feel a furious masculine presence in the far corner of my garage, the same garage I used the board in. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it because I had been experiencing and sensing energies since childhood, so I was accustomed to such feelings by that point. The energy started to become more comfortable with my presence, and I began to no longer feel that negative energy. I can feel a very heavy energy in my stomach and chest, but it is no longer dark and negative. After a few months of feeling the presence every day, it began, for lack of better language, trying to duck with me more in a childish yet more powerful way than I've ever felt any other energy do. This energy, I strongly believe, is the most powerful I have ever personally encountered and possibly will ever encounter. The entity would always be behind me when I was walking to the garage to leave. Many times I would go to open the door, and it would close itself. I could feel the entity behind me, so I began talking aloud to it from that point forward. Although I don't receive verbal responses that I can hear, the entity often reacts to my words or alters the energy I'm experiencing to indicate a response. The entity definitely prefers to use doors when it seeks my attention, but it has also touched me during meditation and a few other occasions. I was with my friend at probably 2 a.m. in our small town in the parking lot of the grocery store on our bikes. We didn't want to drive since it was summer and we were taking in the fresh air. I closed my eyes while standing in the empty parking lot. I was hovering over my bike, and my friend was beside me. All of a sudden I felt those same black hands with sharp nails gently on my lower back. I immediately opened my eyes and looked to my friend, who could immediately see something had happened. I asked her if she had touched me, and she replied no, explaining that she had been beside me the entire time. She would start to sometimes feel the entity's energy around me. One time I was driving, probably a couple weeks after the parking lot incident, and she saw the hand come beside my face while I was driving. That same summer we went on a trip together with 2 other people. There was a small pond near the Airbnb we were staying at, and at about 3 a.m. we were about to go to the pond, and one of the people we were with yelled "Hail Satan" into the forested pond area. After that, I told my friend that the entity was suggesting to me that we shouldn't go into the pond. I felt an overwhelming heaviness, and as I expressed this, she had an unforgettable look in her eyes. She mentioned she could see the dark entity wrapping its arms around my shoulders as if to hold me down so I would not go in. When we went in the pond area anyways, a light from a utility shed kept flashing on and off a total of 3 separate times. My friend and I knew we all had to pack up our stuff and leave the bench we were sitting on. We left the pond, and the next day the other 2 people on the trip, who aren't very spiritually inclined or open to it, left for the day, and my friend and I went back to the pond. We both had an overwhelming need to, for whatever reason. We noticed the bench we were sitting on the night before was a memorial bench, and the 2 others had disrespected that space, and that is why the entity was trying to get me to leave the pond that first night. After the summer trip, in October 2019, we moved forward in time. I began a relationship with my significant other, and previously, a friend of mine was present at my partner's residence with me and her then boyfriend. We were all sitting at the kitchen table, and the door behind us opened by itself. My friend looked to me and said, "Hey." So I replied, "That's not very nice, sir, close the door." Needless to say, everyone almost died of shock when the door immediately closed. This is when I started to really know that this entity is very, very real. It will do things in front of the people I'm around and not just in front of me. That was what really stuck in my head. Other small experiences included the shower curtain blowing open while I was showering, the screen door to my house remaining open after I swung it and there was no wind, and a door near my entryway that always opens when I haven't paid much attention to the entity's presence, serving as a reminder. While watching The Nun, he imitated the gesture of placing his hands over my face during the coffin scene to mock the Christian demons and the film itself, and I could continue further. I think you get the idea. This entity I notice has a purple aura, which is what made me realize that it was attached to me, most likely because of the meditation. This entity is always around me. Just yesterday, while I was feeling down, I experienced goosebumps and chills over my entire body as I sensed the entity directly behind me. Although it wasn't trying to drain my energy, I felt very alone, and it seemed as though it was attempting to comfort me. I have decided that I'm not going to try and cleanse this energy away, and I'll let it stay for as long as it feels like. Since I'm not being drained, it's not hurting anyone, and I see no need to detach the entity if it doesn't want to go and isn't doing anything. It has been fully attached to me for nearly 3 years now, and it has become a normal part of my daily life. If you made it to the end of my scrambled story, I'm glad I could keep your interest. I'd love to know what you think of this. Any comments or questions would be appreciated.